Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Mayor.
Keep your hands.
Yes, come on down, Council.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Congratulations
Thank you.
again.
Yeah. Thanks, sir.
We are very appreciative of those who serve our community, and we're grateful that you've chosen Kaysville to serve. So thank you. We're looking forward to many years having you here in Kaysville. All right. We will move on to any declarations of conflict of interest. All right. We'll move on to our consent items. Would anybody like to move the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent items as outlined on the agenda.
Any second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by
Councilmember Lords and seconded by Councilmember Barber. Let's go for a vote. Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. And we will move on to our action items. Our first item is an ordinance creating Chapter 12-5 Parks and Recreation Advisory Board of Title 12 Parks Public Property, and we'll have a presentation from Cole Stevens. And we have no one signed up to speak on this, so we'll go straight into presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is just a follow-up from our work item that occurred last January 9th. You have before you is a resolution creating the ordinance of Chapter 12-5 Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Just to note, you'll note the changes that were made based on the recommendations from the work session in the first section 12-5-1, which basically composes a 7-member citizen committee, and that is what's presented before you tonight. Happy to take any questions. But
Okay. Any questions from council? I see no questions. I will entertain a motion on this item.
I'll motion that we approve, sorry, I didn't have it in front of me, that we approve an ordinance creating Chapter 12-5 Parks and Recreation Advisory Board of Title 12 Parks and Public Property.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Adams, seconded by Councilmember Lortz. Any comments at this time? Councilmember Barber?
Thank you. I'm really excited about this board. I think there's a lot of questions about what exactly it does, and the greatest part about it is that it's just a foundation to make recommendations to the city, to City Council. And so even when you review the contract specific, or the ordinance, sorry, it doesn't specifically say all of the things, an exhausted list of what they'll look at. It's basically that they will be recommending all future ideas to the City Council, and it gives more formalized reason for citizen input, and also subcommittees appointed beneath that. I know we've already had some discussion about subcommittees that need to be formed. They can be independent and make recommendations to that board as well. So anything in there here that you see is a workable item. I think Cole and I have talked about how we're going to keep amending as we find out what works for Kaysville. We're going off of what's worked for neighboring cities really well, but we might need to change based on our needs, and I think we have a council that's really willing to do that. So, thank you.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Councilmember Tran.
I just had one question about compensation,
Okay.
just for this board.
Yes.
How is that established, and at what point do we set a budget, and just wondering about that. I know it's not a lot of money, but, you know.
Yeah, so I think how it's left is we left that in the ordinance as defined by resolution. So that would occur during the council during the budget year, if that's something that they decided they wanted to do. But we left it in the ordinance as it was written, which is the very last one. It says, I shall receive compensation fixed by resolution of the city council. So that's for the council to decide at some point.
We
if
could
they decide.
simply, easily do that
Councilmember
just through a
Blackham?
consolidated fee schedule.
Correct.
All right.
So as of right now, it's completely voluntary. The council can decide that at some time in the future if they choose to. So.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. For you, it's okay. This time. All right. All right, I'd entertain, we've had a motion, we had a second, I think we're ready to vote. Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we'll go on to preliminary plat approval for the Boynton Corner subdivision at approximately 711 North Fairfield Road, Davis and Weber Counties Canal Company. And who's presenting this?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, I'll give a brief presentation and introduction to this item. If you'll forgive me a little bit, I wasn't at our last meeting, and just with so many new members on the council, I might speak too much on this first item, just kind of outlining some of the process and things we do with these land use items that you'll see regularly on your tenure as a council member. This particular one here this evening, just to give an overview, then I'll talk more specifics, what's been done and what we're looking for from you tonight. Involves this corner property off of Boynton Road and Fairfield Drive. It's currently about 0.8 acres, pretty large lot. Davis and Weber Counties Canal provides secondary pressure irrigation to a large portion of Kaysville and other communities, mostly the northern third of Kaysville. They've been looking for sites to put in a pump station to increase pressure throughout their system. So a lot of people will be hopefully very happy and pleased if this moves forward. The Planning Commission, when they first saw this, had two parts that they considered with this application. So because they're public utility, they get to be a little more leeway than other properties, I guess you say, if it was for commercial or residential development. So typically in the zone, it's an RA district, and that's usually a half-acre lot designation that you would see. There are provisions within our ordinance to say for public utilities, there can be leniency and deviance in both lot size and yards and so forth within that. And that's something the Planning Commission looked at their most recent meeting through the conditional use process. So they did look at fencing, landscaping, materials on the building, placement and so forth as they discussed that. And so that's been something under their purview that they've dealt with previously and provided. I'll show you the exhibit as to roughly what that will look like here before you this evening. They also gave recommendation on the preliminary plat. So they're a recommending body when it comes to the plat. In this case, with the conditional use approval, it's an administrative type action. So making sure it checks the boxes that they have what's necessary. And if so, you're quite limited in your scope as a council as to what kind of flexibility you have in this particular preliminary plat. And I'll talk to you about some others on the agenda this evening that are slightly different and explain why. But just to wrap up, you can see the home will remain on the property on what is identified as Lot 1. It's still over 20,000 square feet in size, over half acres required. The remaining property would go towards the corner to about 12,000 square feet to create the new lot for the utility. Again, because the conditional use, it meets the size, width, and other requirements that we would look for. This just gives you an idea of what's going there. So again, this is more what the Planning Commission looked at as far as the placement, what the site might look like, the building that the utilities would be located in. Again, they discussed fencing as well and landscaping towards the corner. So those were items that they've already made some conditions and a decision with. So this evening, we're simply looking for on this one a motion from the City Council regarding the preliminary plat itself. The recommendation from the Planning Commission was unanimous to approve the plat as presented before you. And with that, I'll close my remarks.
All right, thank you. We don't have anybody signed up to speak to this item, so we'll go to questions from council. Any questions? Councilmember Blackham.
Rick, this question's for you. So will this help the pressure situation we have with pressure irrigation in West Kaysville without having to put a casing under the freeway and another line?
Yes, so this is, again, we're going to be able to use the water from Kaysville Irrigation Reservoir, as well as boost the water that's coming down Fairfield.
So this is going to make a lot of people really happy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilmember Adams?
So do you have that picture of the one with the Google map? So I talked to this neighbor when I was campaigning, and she said, if you can get my water pressure to be better, then I'll vote for you. So I just want to, if she's in the room, I'm not sure if she is. You're across the street. Anyway, is it going to affect the local, I mean, these people that are local, or is this just kind of one of those where you're putting the building there, but it's not going to affect the people who live right by it?
Actually, it will, because, again, right now our water's up by Lindquist Mortuary, Church Street area. And so think of how many miles that water has to travel. So again, this is going to boost the water from Kaysville Irrigation Reservoir, as well as keep basically a constant flow down Fairfield Road. So yes.
And then my second question, I talked to these neighbors here, and then my aunt lives right here. Their only concern was that it's beautified, that it doesn't, become an eyesore. And I guess we don't really have much say, as Lyle was saying, that we don't have much say of telling you to do that. But are there plans to have trees, bushes, something
yes,
to keep
so
it?
I'm not sure if we have the Google Earth, but right now, currently, there's just trees and basically a slatted fence. So we're going to basically try to keep it as best we can.
Keep that stuff there.
Again, we haven't even gone to design. We've just been over a year trying to secure property. So once we have this property and we close on it, then we'll actually go to design and kind of get better views of what that architectural look is going to be.
I think that's the only concern the neighbors really have, is that it doesn't look like an eyesore.
Yeah.
So that's all I have.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Nope. All right.
Okay, thank
you. All right. I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make that motion. I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat for the corner of Boynton, 711 North Fairfield for Davis and Weaver Canal.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Blackham and seconded by Councilmember Tran. Any comments? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 Unanimous. Thank you. All right. We are going on to rezone of approximately 1.5 acres of property at 191 South Flint Street from R120 single-family residential to R110 single-family residential to include the PRUD, Planned Residential Unit Development Overlay Zone. And
If I may, Mayor, I think it may be appropriate to introduce the next item together with that, as it's essentially the same discussion. We'll look for two different motions, but if that's appropriate, we'd make that request.
Absolutely. All right.
So, and looking at item C and D for including the preliminary plat for the Elms on Flint Street subdivision, the property here, just right off of Webb Lane and Flint Street, it's on the east side of the street. Consists of, again, as stated by the mayor, about a 1.5 acre property. So again, forgive maybe the coaching, but hopefully it's helpful and for the public as well. So there are two parts to what we're looking at here this evening is listed on the agenda. First is the rezone item. And so the rezone is a legislative type decision. As the council, you've got a lot of discretion on whether or not you choose to approve or deny a rezone. Primarily, you would look at the general plan, how you think it works with the language there in the general plan. Some of that language is here within the staff report, but as well how it fits within the area and whether you feel it's appropriate for the site where it's proposed. Currently, the property is on an R120. So in R1, we have several R1 districts that are all single-family residential. The uses themselves that are allowed on them are essentially identical, but what changes from an R120 to an R110, for example, is the allowed lot size. So the number of homes and the size of lot that they're on is the primary difference. Excuse me. The other element of this is the PRED overlay zone, and that's where the plat discussion will get a little bit different here in a minute. But what that allows for is flexibility in the way that the site is developed. Previously, this lot's a little bit unique. It has gone through and started development about a decade ago under some older ordinances. We used to allow by conditional use, a cluster-type subdivision, and private streets were all managed through that process. Currently, we do that through the zoning process with the PRED, and in this case, it would allow the private street. And so on the property currently, there's an existing private street. The developer is proposing to essentially use that infrastructure and to facilitate the plat itself. Let's skip ahead. So you can see the surrounding properties in brown on the map. It's pretty much in the middle of an R120 zoning designation. There are a couple other R1LD, some agricultural properties throughout the area on that map. And again, the request is to accommodate, and this is where the plat comes into place, this proposed concept. So the R110 would accommodate this type of development, which is set up for 5 single-family homes. With the PRED, again, they get the private street development rather than a typical standard public street. Again, that's the infrastructure that's already in place there. Some of the unique things as well that are proposed with this, because of the PRED, there is in your packet a proposed development agreement. It essentially limits it to single-family development, the 5 lots, single-family homes. The setbacks would be similar to a standard R120 as far as front, rear yard, anything that would be adjacent to the existing development. The developer is hoping to, on the internal side yards, go from what would be typically an 8-foot setback down to 5 feet. So that would be something unique to this one that the PRED would allow should the council feel it's appropriate. This is roughly the same image, just showing some of the landscaping and intention along the Flint Street and the southern property line. So just looking over my notes here and making sure I'm getting this correct. So the Planning Commission held a public hearing for this at their most recent meeting. They did recommend, again, 2-part for both the rezone, unanimously approval of the R110 PRED, as well as the preliminary plat for the subdivision. So in your consideration, there are 2 parts. The plat itself is very much dependent on the zone. So you'd want to consider the zone itself, and again, it's kind of one of the same discussion. If the R110 and the PRED are appropriate, then the plat, with some wiggle room that you could be a little bit flexible on what you want to see out of the plat, is essentially compliant with that zoning designation. But if the zone is not granted, then this plat does not work. It doesn't meet the R120 that's there currently. So we would be, again, looking for just the 2 motions this evening. The developer I know is here tonight that I could answer additional questions, and I'd be happy to do so myself. I'll probably close my remarks there and turn it back to the council.
Okay. We'll have 3 minutes for the applicant to say anything that he would like.
Thank you, Mayor. Phil Holland. I live in Kaysville on Dutch Lane, just near this property. A couple of things I just wanted to point out to you. I drive by this site 3 or 4 times a day. I'm down this Webb Lane and then down Tyler's Way, if you're familiar with that area. And I recently did a community down there. We called it Tyler Meadows. We had a phase 1 and a phase 2. And it was received extremely well by the market. And I've heard great things about it ever since. And I picked a lot for myself because I wanted to be there. We have completely sold out of those lots. And what was unique about them, I don't know if you have Google or if you can access that easily, but what was unique about that property is you had some half acres in a cul-de-sac section on Dutch Lane, and then you had smaller lots on Tyler's Way as it moved towards Smith Lane. And what I'm proposing, because I'm totally out of lots, is to make this almost an attachment to that property. There's still a massive demand for custom to semi-custom lots. Most lots in Kaysville right now are controlled by builders. And when like I said earlier, I've been driving about by this property for multiple years. One thing interesting recently struck me, and that is the general plan change. And when it allowed for medium density on arterial and, in this case, I believe Flint Road is a collector. What? He said it. He said it so well. Whoever that guy is. So my thought here was I'll make an extension of Tyler Meadows. It's going to be of similar quality. It's going to be semi-custom to custom. These will be $600,000 to $1 million homes. And saying that out loud makes me cringe, but that's where we're at in the marketplace. Half-acre lot homes in West Kaysville right now, you can't build a home for, less than $900,000, which is just baffles us. My effort on this is not to hit, a market rate where we're just going to try to get in there and build as many homes as possible. That's not the effort. The effort is to hit where this market is today on West Kaysville, custom to semi-custom, $900,000 homes. We're trying to fit right below that in that $600,000 to $800,000 range. Just finishing up, Mayor and Council, the property has been dead for 12 years, and anybody who lives in that neighborhood knows that. There's graffiti on the asphalt. There's an RV parked there. There's been weeds for 12 years. It's important to me to do a good job here because, like I said, I am somebody who drives past this every day. If I left this up to one of my competitors, they'd be in front of you trying to get a higher density, which is also a motivator for me. Thanks for your time. Any questions?
Thank you.
Later.
Maybe.
Yes, thank you. All right, we are going to go to public comment now. First, we have Tom Gill.
Hello. Thank you for letting me come up here and state a few things. I know many of you I've emailed you, and I appreciate your comments back, and so I won't reiterate some things again there. But my name is Tom Gill. I live in the lot just south, kind of in the middle, Lot 9 of Quail Hollow. We moved here 15 years ago from Lawrence, Kansas. Kaysville's been an outstanding community. Thank you for all you do to make it such a great community. Some of you may know, 12 years ago we went through the whole process with this lot to when other development occurred, where you see the little sliver that was sold off by one of the neighbors, but essentially we were asked to work with the developer on a compromise that would allow something to occur in there. And so the neighbors all got together with the developer. The compromise was to sell that little piece, divide it up. That gave them enough to have 3 half-acre lots. They put the road. We didn't necessarily like the road, but the road is in now, and it goes right through my backyard, basically. But at the time, we had to compromise to have 3 lots. We would love to see this lot developed. I drive by it probably 30 times a day. And it has been an eyesore, and I think it would be great to have something, but I think it would be great just to stick with the original compromise of having 3 lots, and I think it still could be a great little development. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Gill.
Thank you. Again, I emailed all of the city council, so I will just emphasize, I won't take long, but I'm Kathy Gill, Tom's wife. We live in Lot 9. We would love to see it developed, but we do have concerns about there being 5 homes back there. When we moved to the neighborhood, it was a lot. We loved the spacious fill, the look all around us, our big lots, privacy between houses, and we feel like to put a big row of homes right next to each other with a 5-foot setback would not fit with the neighborhood and the feel there. We also have concerns about the traffic with the road right there and the vinyl fence that, as you can see from this shot, all of our swing sets are along the back, the basketball courts right along that back area, which at one point the counselors did have a car come through there. The fence, there's just concerns about if you have 5 homes. Right now, our neighborhood, everyone has at least 3 cars. On our cul-de-sac, we probably have 4 to 5 cars each home. I just can't imagine how many cars could fit parked and going in and out, and I feel like it would be a problem. But thank you for listening to our concerns and making the best decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christy Gardner. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. I also emailed all of you. Thank you for your responses. I've taken some time over the last couple of days to read portions of the Title 17 in the municipal code about the planned residential development overlay zone, which is specific to the piece that is being asked here. Some of the items that stood out to me were 17-34-5, additional criteria. In considering the application for planned residential unit development overlay zone, the following shall be evaluated. I won't read all of them, but the ones that stood out were the relationship to existing and proposed land uses and the circulation plans of the community and the avoidance of disrupting elements in the neighborhood, impacts of the roads, lanes, or driveways on adjacent properties, and impacts on the privacy of adjacent properties. I feel like all of those items directly impact all of the homes that immediately border this. As Kathy just said, the homes that line that private road have children that are playing there, and for each home that you have on that lot, that's an additional car. And it's not just one car, it's their family members, their extended family members, their neighbors, their friends, FedEx deliveries. There's multiple cars that are going to be driving up and down this road that is very, very narrow and very small. There's not going to be parking for family parties. There's not going to be parking for anything like that. So they're now going to be out on Flint, which is already a busier road, so we don't need to add cars and congestion to that. Are they going to come around the corner and park in front of my home? My home is the one along Flint as well. The other piece of this is it says to mitigate the imposing conditions that I just listed above, one of the items is reduction in density. And I feel like this particular situation, we're doing the exact opposite. And so it's concerning to me that we would increase density when it should be a mitigating factor to go the other way. I won't restate all of the items that were in my letter, but I do feel that in general, Title 17 is there to protect what is already zoned. It matches the neighborhood. And I don't feel that rezoning it would match the neighborhood. I think it impacts our privacy with the 5-foot setbacks. It changes the feel of the neighborhood, and it's going to make it very uncomfortable. And to all due respect to the developer, I more than drive by this home or this property every single day. I sit in my home and I look out my back window and I see this property all the time, and I definitely want it developed, but I don't want 5 homes. I think that that's intrusive and not appropriate for this particular land. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Becky Argyle.
Hello. I also sent you all emails, so I won't go over the same thing that I sent you. A couple things, though. As Lyle mentioned, he went through the surrounding neighborhoods that were zoned R1LD and R120. Those all have the same setbacks. The front edge is 30, the back is 15, and the side requirements are 8 feet. So Tyler Meadows has the side requirement of 8 feet. So 5 feet is not 8 feet. And those, when you're talking about 5 feet and 5 feet, that 16-foot difference does make a big difference in the feel of a neighborhood. So as much as I like Tyler Meadows, I do, that's going to look different in just that small sliver of property. It's going to, the rhythm of the neighborhood is going to look different in that one small area. And then also, the lot size. The lot size in Tyler Meadows, yes, there are a few clusters on that one corner that are .33. I'm the one who sent you those really detailed plot diagrams. But most of them are .4, .5. There's some that are even over an acre, and even like 1.4 acre, like the developer said, which is great. But as you look in this one piece off Flint, 4 out of 5 are .24, .24, .26, .27. That whole section, those are really small lots. And if you try and cram in 5 lots with big, beautiful homes, that again, that's throwing off the flow of that neighborhood. So that's just my thoughts, that I'm opposed to this. I really am. As much as I like the contractor, he does build beautiful homes. I think he should just stick with three homes there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And then an additional 3 minutes for the applicant, and then we'll go to questions.
Thank you. Well stated. I agree with everything said. Just wanted to point out a couple of things. There's a property that has already been developed, has sewer, water, gas, power, electricity, a road, curb, gutter. Those are challenges. If they're already on site, you've got to work around those, and that's one of the reasons for the PUD. There's been some talk about, let's just make them half-acre lots. None of the property, you see the cul-de-sac right there to the south, none of those properties are even close to half-acre. They're .36, .38, and they vary in that degree. When Quail Hollow was done, maybe 15 years ago, land use was a little different than it is today. We have a resource that is tremendously scarce, and that is land. And my job is to basically work with cities to figure out a way to, what's the best and highest use of land. And just saying, let's keep 3 lots here, we like the 3 lots, well, that wouldn't be consistent with what those neighbors have to the south of me. Those are .3, they're third-acre lots. And the lot number 1 on the front there is consistent with theirs. So really we're talking about this property is already developed. We're trying to work within the confines of challenges that we already have. On the front, you can see there's an existing berm there. We've highlighted that, and we'll clean that up tremendously. The other thing that we've talked about to the Planning Commission is our fencing. The fencing is falling down. It was great in 2008 when that fencing was put up. It's no longer that way. So I think that the homes themselves, today's buyer, whether he be or she be a younger family or an older family where the kids have moved out, whatever their status is, the buyer is changing. And Quail Hollow 15 years ago when it was developed, it's evolved. People want larger homes, but they don't want to take care of a massive lot. And that's why Kaysville, over the last 20 years, as I've been developing in Kaysville, it's transitioned from acre lots to half-acre lots to the R1LD, which was a great zone at the time. And then the new general plan, and I just want to finish with that, gives these roads, it says, consider medium-density housing. I think this is still low-density housing.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, we are going to go to questions. Questions first. Councilmember Adams.
Yeah, Lyle, one first question on, you mentioned the half-acre lots. That includes that road, if I'm not correct.
So, yeah, the lots on the plat aren't quite a half acre in size. The largest one is, I think, 16,000 square feet, 15,600. Yes, those lots include the private street as part of that area.
So I'm talking about prior to the original plan, the previous plan.
Yeah, so
with the three, I mean, one of Mr. Holland's comments was that comparing to the neighboring lots that they're .38. If you take the road or the private lane out of the equation, how big are these lots when it's set at 3?
Yeah, take a second to run
Does that make,
maybe
I mean,
the
that,
original. The total property, street, everything is 1.5 acres. So you divide that by 3, each of the prior idea, if they were half acres or wherever they sat close to that, that included the road. So the buildable area would have been that minus the roadway. It's 24, 26-foot wide road, 100 feet. You're probably down to 0.4 acres per lot, somewhere in that realm originally.
And then,
So, John,
Yeah.
if I could, I tried to measure that out. The ones that show they're like 10,000 square feet, takes 2,000, so it truly is about an 8,000 square foot lot once you take the road out, because the ones he's talking about are on a public street. So when you're talking about the 13,000 square feet or the third acre, or the ones adjacent to that property, they're on a public street. So that is the lot is actually that size. In these cases, the road's included in the lot.
and that's what my question
Yeah,
was. Like,
and
they're not truly half-acre lots because the road takes up a substantial amount of each of those half-acre lots, if I'm not
Yeah,
correct.
depending on how you're looking at it, I'd say they are truly that size of a lot. The buildable area is not truly that size. So that's semantics. I think we're talking the same thing, but yes, the square footage you see before you includes the private street in front of each of those homes.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Lords.
So Lyle, it was brought up that the street's very small. What's the width of the street there, the private lane?
Let me zoom in to
Is
double
it a
check
standard
it.
26 or?
From the fence to the curb is 30 feet. That's how wide the road is.
Okay, so the road's 30 feet wide?
There's a 4 or 5 foot park strip buffer there on the south side, so it's I thought it was 24 feet on the private lane.
The actual paved lane?
That's pretty standard what we'll do. It might be a little bit wider on this one. I can't see the dimensions, so I apologize, I don't have the number.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the.
But yeah, for your consideration, so that's one of the interesting things with the PRUD. So it will allow for a developer to do private streets, and they can do them at standards that are different from a public street. As was mentioned by the residents and the public, if that's going to give you a better design or better layout, if you feel that creates a more interesting neighborhood. It's also a street that the city doesn't take over and maintain, so that's on the residents and the HOA that would be formed to plow, to take care of, to mill and overlay or whatever, and maintain over the years. So in that case, the city's decided sometime in the past that it's an option to allow them to have some flexibility on those sizes. Our fire chief has looked at it, and generally speaking, they're okay with the idea. They've got the hammerhead turnaround on it, but certainly it's a tighter street than a typical public
So that was
right-of-way.
my second question, is if the fire department with new standards says this is acceptable versus 12 years ago.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And Councilmember Adams, I
Well,
think you had a
and,
couple.
I don't know if anybody else, I just still had those, 2 more questions. That sliver of land that was deeded, or was it ever deeded over to the developer? Like, is it owned currently?
So the family that currently owns the property also owns that sliver that's kind of in that dark spot. So that's all part of the plat and being considered together. So
I guess my question is, one of the neighbors mentioned that 12 years ago that they came up with sort of an agreement to give them that sliver to make it so that it was equal to 1.5, so that they could do half-acre lots. Is that sliver now, was that just given to,
And I don't know the arrangements, if it was sold or just given outright, but currently, and I'm on the county's assessor records, it is controlled and owned by the family that owns the rest of it, so.
that owns this piece of property?
Yeah, so it's all
been
owned together.
It's done, like, they
Right.
couldn't give it back, essentially, unless they wanted to.
So the family that owns it, it's, they could deed it back.
Right.
But yeah, it's in their control as to what to
It's in
do
their
with.
control. And then my second question is, what's been done, property, it was mentioned that the road's been put there. Was there anything else put in for these 3 lots, i.e. water, sewer, electrical?
Yeah, so the developer's gone out and I think done some groundwork as well to verify it, but the utilities were put in place to serve the 3 homes, 2009, 2008, back when it was originally developed. So there are utilities on site for 3 homes. They would have to add it and stub additional utilities for any additional homes if it were to go that direction.
And they probably follow the guidelines of what those initial 3 lots were set up to be, like, meaning that they're on each individual lines.
Yeah, so we would have to double check. Typically with the final plat, we'll verify some of that detail, but yes, they're workable with the private street and as far as where they're located. Usually the considerations are where do you place a driveway if you got meter boxes and things to work around, and we could be flexible on where they're located. The sizes would verify for the home, but they're generally have not increased, other than maybe people often use more power, but all those things can be accommodated. And so, again, going back, and forgive me for maybe the broader overview and kind of just the process on it, but you can, of course, as a council, if you feel before you give a zone, ask for as much detail as you think would be necessary for you to feel comfortable. So that's the beauty of the rezone is, again, you've got all kinds of discretion and leeway on, they've got to prove to you that that's the right thing for the spot. Generally speaking, under a platting process, under preliminary, they've done a certain amount of detail to give an idea, beyond just a concept of what would be on the property. And if they get the push and go ahead from the council that, yeah, we'd like to see that kind of development, we think that number of lots and that general configuration are good, they'll then go and have the assurance they need to spend the rest of their money on the full engineering and the rest of the details at final plat. So some of those questions, I say that is, we've looked at it, generally speaking, we think it's okay, but some of the full engineering and final details, we've not got to that point yet. So that's where we'd be looking for your direction. If you're inclined to go this way, they'll have to come back with more.
Okay. Councilmember Tran.
Lyle, do you have an example, and I don't want to put you on the spot, I don't mean to, but in a neighborhood where the side setbacks are 5 versus 8, so that I can just kind of visually picture what that's going to look like? Because I was doing some measurements, and I mean, even the width of my kitchen, table is 5 feet. So it's just not very much space. And so
I'm 5 feet.
I'm 5 feet. Yeah, good point. I'm 4'11", so I'm close.
Just lay down 2 times so we can see.
Close to that.
We've done it a number of times. More frequently in Kaysville, it's been a 5 and an 8. So, again, when you talk the 5 feet, that's per home, so you get 10 feet total between houses. I believe Hill Farms, which is close to this, is a 5 and an 8 example. I may be wrong. We might allow 2 5s next to each other.
I think the row houses in Hill Farms are 5 and 5.
So that may be the case. There were different types of housing in there that have it. If you'd like, I could take a minute to maybe look through and find some examples for you, Councilwoman Tran, and get that answer for you. Off the top of my head, I'm not positive in Kaysville where we've got
5 and 5, except for the homes that are against the existing
on the perimeters.
We're 8 and 8 on the perimeter.
So yeah, so you'll see that. It sounds like that's probably the best and most applicable example you'll find here. Would be that neighborhood. So 10 feet between the houses.
Okay, thanks. I was wondering about that.
Okay. Councilmember Lortz.
So, Lau, can you just help me, so between 150 South and the private lane, what's that distance?
Let me measure it. That'll take me just a minute to get the right measuring in here for you,
Well,
Councilman.
my guess
If you
is
have
it's
another
probably
question, like
250
that.
feet. Is that a standard?
Just
or-
looking at so what we like between lanes, roughly 150 feet is kind of a standard that you'd go with. That one, you can tell from the depth of the lot, you're probably in the 200-plus range on it. Yeah, I'd be happy to take a measurement on it and get you more specific as I pull this up.
I can see the 150 on Lot 1. I just wasn't sure how much the other lot was there, above it. On Lot 10, is it? But that's fine. If it's 200 plus, then you said that's okay.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right. I'm going to entertain a motion at this time
I'll
for
make-
the rezone.
Rezone, okay. I'll make a motion to deny the rezone at 191 South Flint Street.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Blackham and seconded by Councilmember Adams. Let's go to comments. Councilmember Blackham, do you want to explain?
Okay. The reason I made the motion to deny this is I know the history of this property, and I know that this was a remnant piece that the original developer of Circle J had, and then I believe he gave that or sold it to somebody, I don't know. And then Quail Hollow came in, and that was built later, and there was the remnant piece that was left there, and it had 150 feet of frontage. And I think at the time when most people understood the zoning and the zoning laws, they thought, because a lot of this was A1 and R120, and when it was the A1 required a minimum of 100 foot of frontage, so to them that was still a single lot, okay? And I think a lot of people thought that in their head, and then you get developers and people who know how to dig into the ordinances and they understand the ordinances. They realized they could do a flag lot possibly, which would have allowed 2 lots. And, most people wouldn't have known that, but I think they looked into that. And then also, the private lane came in. But the thing there is here is the people originally thought it was enough for 1 lot, then 2 lots, and then through some negotiation with some neighbors, and I have to commend the people who live around this property. They did exactly what councils asked them to do. Go back with the developer, try to come up with some sort of a remedy, how you can make this work that people can agree on. Now, not everybody really liked the idea of having 3 lots, but they bought into it. One of the homeowners there sold a portion of the property, so that the owner and developer were able to get at least 3 lots, and they agreed on. He said, "I will sell you this property if you will put 3 single-family dwellings on there." There was a lot of negotiations and a lot of other things and a lot of other proposals, but that was the one that the neighborhood agreed on. And in good faith, I think everybody thought that's how it was going to go. Why the 3 houses never got built? We all know the economy went really bad in 2007-8, but I think in good faith to the people, they intended on there being 3 houses there. That's what was presented to them. They conceded they felt like. I know the Planning Commission made it sound like it's just 3 houses to 5 houses, but it's really not. It's really 1 lot that they conceded to 3. And now to go from 1 to 5 is a lot more than I think what they bought into. It took a lot of people to buy into that original. And like I said, they did exactly what we asked people to do. They went with the developer and got with the homeowners, both bent one way or the other a little bit, and they came to a consensus, and that's what was done. And so that's the reason why I would motion to deny the rezone.
Okay. Councilman Adams,
Next.
yeah.
I don't know
what's
if
your
you want to pronate. I think you'll find that I'm typically, I believe very firmly in property owners' rights and to make the most out of their property. And I think that if I were in this situation, I would want to get the most possible bang for my buck out of the property. What probably steers me on this one is what Mike just discussed, or Councilmember Blackham just brought up, was that it was discussed, that sliver of property was given. they did make accommodations to make it 3 lots. Once the road is there, these homes with 3 lots will fit with the surrounding homes, and that's what I like to see, is something that fits with the rest of the neighborhood. I think that, to Mr. Holland's credit, you built some beautiful homes, really beautiful homes, and made Kaysville so great. I believe the general plan was changed to create more affordable housing. I'm not sure 600 to $1 million qualifies for that. I don't know that 5 homes at 600 to $1 million in that area, helps us with the Affordable Housing Act. And so for me, it then becomes like we don't want to just make dense for dense sake. And I feel like the 3 homes is proper for what's there. And they've got the stuff in. They've already got the electrical. It's stubbed in. I think somebody's got to come up with a plan to make 3 homes in that area that will work.
Okay. Councilmember Tran.
Maybe it's a question. Is
Okay.
it too late? It's
no.
For Lyle.
Okay, go
Okay,
ahead.
so here's a question. If this was developed into 4 lots, would a rezone be required to do 4 lots?
I believe so. Let me just I get to do a lot of math on the fly here, but, so I would suspect, and I'll just run the numbers here, so you got 1.5 acres, that's 65,000 square feet of property to work with, and so again, dividing that just by 20,000 square feet per lot under the existing zone, 3 lots is the most you can get out of it.
Okay.
So it would have to be rezoned to something to get anything more than is currently allowed on the property. 4 lots could be accommodated by an R114 zoning designation. Going down to the 10,000 square foot lots, the R110 actually could allow as many as 6. The development agreement restricts it to 5, so the current request wouldn't allow that many, but you can kind of see that we make leaps and jumps since we don't have an R1 everything. There are those gaps, and so, yeah, it would require something to do a 4th lot.
To do that, okay. Can I make a comment then?
Yes.
Okay, appreciate it. So I live on Sunset, off of Sunset, so just down around the corner. So I drive by this pretty often and see it, and I definitely think it would look nice developed as well. And with all due respect to neighbors, I mean, I appreciate the fact that historically you've made agreements with previous developers, I guess, and the landowner, and had communication and everything, and I appreciate that. That being said, I also think that, and I do 100% support the rights of property owners to be able to develop land that they own. You know, as neighbors, sometimes we'd like to have a lot of influence about what goes next door to us, but we don't own the property. And so as much as we want to express ourselves and we should be heard and we should be able to provide input, you know, at the end of the day, we don't own the property. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think that really 5 lots is a lot here. I think 10 feet between houses, especially right there. I drove it at night just to kind of see what it would feel like at night, and I know people have been complaining about the lights that would shine into their backyards and to the back of their houses and stuff. I'm sure that can be fixed with a taller fence maybe. But I wanted to kind of see how safe it would feel and how confined it would feel, and I've also done it during the day. So I really feel like maybe 4 lots would be more appropriate than 5. And but that being said, I don't think that we have to necessarily just revert back to a previous agreement. I don't think that that's necessarily something that needs to be honored in this situation for 3 lots. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. I think one clarification I really want to make is the discussion around the general plan. And we know we've been working on this for well over a year, and we're still not done, obviously, with this general plan. But it will allow for different types of housing in Kaysville, which is something I was really interested in when I started on council 2 years ago, and now I really do see the need for it in Kaysville. But that doesn't mean it goes everywhere. It still means that every piece of property is uniquely looked at and make sure it fits where it goes. We're going to see another development later on this evening that I think is a really good example of a diversity in housing. I think it fits really well there. So when we talk about something like Hill Farms with their smaller setbacks, there's a variety there as well. There's a buffer towards existing neighborhoods. And so with the general plan, that gives the city some ability to bring in diversity in housing, but it isn't a guarantee. I think I can commit that we as a council, we're going to keep looking at each piece specifically and say what fits here, what feels right, what both within the general plan, needing more affordable and variety of housing, and within the existing neighborhoods that are there. So I think the more we look at the general plan as an opportunity to do a great thing rather than something to build fear in what might come in the future, I think that's the better approach to look at it as city and as residents. So, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Lords.
So I guess I better take my 2 minutes, right? Really, I mean, there's a lot of things to consider here. I mean, I agree with Councilmember Blackham that, there's been a lot of history here, a lot of things, and does it fit where there's no other zoning other than an R120 around it? I feel for the residents and what they expected, and they've lived there for years, and they've expected a certain thing. I live by Hill Farms development, so I know it very, very well. I know the row houses, and personally, I don't like them, but I accept that they're there, and there's great people that live there, and I love the people that have moved in. And I think that the neighbors would find the people that move in would probably fit in very well, because most everybody integrates very well into Kaysville, ends up loving their neighborhoods and their neighbors. For the developer, I would probably suggest, from my perspective, having the neighbors' buy-in is important. It really is important, especially in Kaysville, to get that community feeling, to make sure that there is an animosity before people even move in to a new home, and especially if they're going to spend that much money on a new home. And so, for me, I would encourage that we try to find a way that we get this developed in a way that everybody can feel acceptable. I won't say happy with, because anytime you compromise, not everyone is happy. In fact, no one's happy. Everyone's given up something. And so that's kind of my thoughts right now.
Okay. So everybody's had a turn to speak, and it's time to vote. So we're going to go with Councilmember Lords.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I remembered what we're voting on. Okay, so this is deny the request for this. Okay, aye.
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 Okay. Motion is unanimous. Okay. Given that, probably item D.
Well, I think we'll still want a motion where it's on the
Okay.
agenda, but we probably know
All
where
right.
we're headed.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion on D.
I'll make a motion that we table item D, preliminary plat approval for the Elms on Flint subdivision at 191 South Flint Street.
Question.
Yes.
Instead of table, you would deny it since it
Do you want to
doesn't.
deny it?
Yeah, you'd have to deny it because you can't table it because there's.
It wouldn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter if you table it.
It really wouldn't
Indefinitely.
matter.
We
Still
could take a
can't.
table.
Yeah, in this
indefinitely.
event,
Okay.
you'll have to come back with something different.
Yeah.
Just deny it?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we deny the preliminary plat approval for the Elms on Flint subdivision at 191 South Flint Street.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Lords and seconded by Councilmember Barber. Any comments? Okay. Let's go to a vote. Councilmember Tran.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Then we are going to preliminary plat approval for Deseret Landing subdivision at approximately 700 South Deseret Drive. And Lyle.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've got a lot of programs running here, so maybe just one moment. Okay, so the council, again, is looking for this particular property in the administrative type role for the preliminary plat. The property that we're considering, again, approximately 700 South Desert Drive, is about 25 acres of property directly south of Boondocks. The previous members of the council, some of you were around, would be very familiar with this. It's a site that we've recently went through some rezone process on in consideration of this up-and-coming development. During that process, an agreement was put together, and just as an example, with that agreement, expected. You had the map here in your packet. I've got it on the screen that showed commercial type development and some housing. And then within there were more specific languages to the maximum number of housing units, a minimum amount of commercial development that they would need to see. We expected at the time we may likely see some storage unit swapping from somewhere else in town that would come here. Instead, the commercial components changed a little bit. But it's our findings that it's still consistent with what the development agreement outlined. And we actually get more commercial development and less total housing units. So you can see the preliminary plat, again, within your packet that outlines the commercial lots, 2 large commercial lots, one that would potentially accommodate a use we'll talk about a little bit later tonight that the Planning Commission's previously visited on, commercial lot 2, again, that fronts Deseret Drive. And then probably more specific to spend a little more time on would be the residential piece of the development, which is the south portion of the lot that includes the single-family homes. So within that, there are 42 total units on roughly 8 acres of the 25. Again, the City Council, rezoned the property to the R2 designation, put some constraints and limits on it, and it's our findings of staff that it's still again consistent with that. The Planning Commission met and reviewed this during their meeting and gave a unanimous vote to recommend approval of the preliminary plat as proposed. Since that time, just as an update, and it's within the staff report, the Planning Commission had expressed some concern about just the one point of access into the property. It was our understanding with the detail we had and the initial review from the fire department that it would be sufficient as proposed. But upon further review, they are interested in having that second access, and we would support that from staff, so would recommend that we have that in place. So with that, if the City Council is inclined to move forward to make a recommendation on this proposal, it would be our recommendation that before final plat approval is given, they provide that secondary access at some point. I think those are the key issues, but again, the developer is here to answer additional questions. I'd be happy to do so myself. And with that, I'll turn it to the council.
Okay. 3 minutes, please. And really 3 minutes.
Did I go over a little bit?
Yes. I'm pretty strict about my 3
I
minutes.
was waiting for you to
It's because
sing.
I like you.
I was waiting for you to sing.
I know, you're skating on thin ice, buddy.
Well, the wind is totally out of my sails anyway, so you're going to have 1 minute is all you get from me, based on the fact that this is already part of a development agreement and there's nothing to really be talked about other than 2 items, one of which is the secondary access. So there's a reason do you still have the one that was approved? You don't have your fancy pointer. This one had multiple accesses.
Wow.
This one had multiple accesses. We tried to keep the residential portion separate from the commercial entrances. And then if you'll go to the one that's proposed. For commercial lot 1, their access point is going to be right here. And then commercial lot 2 will most likely access on that same road. One of the major issues we have physically is that there is a brand new, bless their hearts, Dominion Energy high pressure line right there. And we are a little worried that we are not meeting the coverage on this access point. This is something that, that's why engineers make the big bucks. My engineer would say he's not making the big bucks, but that's his challenge to solve. So a topic of discussion, and I'd love to hear your feedback, is this road that comes out. I don't think it would be wise to have a full access off Deseret and have 3 full accesses. One thing that I've done in the past multiple times is provide, if the fire chief initially was okay with this, if he's thinking that he wants better circulation here, there could be an emergency access crash gate something to that effect, connecting this. But I think this commercial use would say, and I actually had an iteration that provide what we're talking about, which is a road from here to here, and I don't think that was kosher either. So that's why you have the plan in front of you. So just a couple of options. I'm definitely open to hearing what you think, but we do have some physical restraints on a high-powered gas line and multiple coverages over that.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, we do not have anybody signed up to speak to this, so we'll go straight to comments. Questions? Yes. Go ahead, Councilmember Barber.
Just making sure I'm in the clear.
It is you.
Okay. I think I still need to understand more about the access points over that gas line. So tell me the reason that it wouldn't work for this second one to connect. Is it because you're afraid of having commercial access and 2 residential access so close together?
I think the proximity is one issue. So you have a 66-foot wide commercial access that's a main access, and then immediately this lot is probably 100 feet. So 100 feet away you'd have another access. This right here, and I don't know the distance, but I would say 70 times, probably 200 feet away.
Yeah.
So yeah, within that 200 feet, you'd have 3 access points. But the coverage issue is the one that's an issue. Whether you come on Deseret Drive, and the property sits a little higher,
Yeah.
and the gas line is where my thumb is.
Yeah.
And so they actually have to go over the top of that,
Yeah.
and physically you can't make that jump. And so we're going to probably have to make something else.
Have to grade it into the
Yes.
neighborhood.
And so there's a little bit of issue there. But I think we're willing to figure that out. But like I said, I think that the crash gate could be potentially an option if it is a public safety issue, if that's what we're talking about. If it's a traffic issue, I've got multiple projects that are over 42 lots off of a single access point. But I'm open for that dialogue. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it's just logistically hard, yeah.
And moving that gas line is,
Not going to happen.
We saw it going in. It was
Yeah.
painful.
I wish they would have put it 5 feet lower.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a comment. Never
Okay.
mind. Never
Okay.
mind.
Thank you.
Holding it. Holding it.
All right. Questions? Councilmember Lortz.
So one question I had in looking at this, the agreement says that the lots bordering the Old Mill Village will be a minimum of 80 feet across, and Lot 1 appears to be under 80 feet. That's adjacent to Old Mill Village on the backside. The front side is 96, but the backside looks like it's less. Just curious on that.
I'll maybe just speak to the dimensions on it and staff's findings. So, I think it's Councilmember Lord's assessment is accurate, and I think it's 65 feet up against that southern property line and larger in the back. In our look over of this, it was my opinion that based on a typical way we measure from our ordinances lot width, it's measured at the front setback essentially of a building. So 30 feet back, 25 feet back, depending on the zone. So in this case, it's over 80 feet where we would normally measure a lot. I think that the council would have its discretion whether or not that actually meets what the development agreement says, but that's where we find that it would be compliant, at least with the standard measurement of an ordinance.
And then the other question I had, in looking at the way that the plat is drawn, it appears the open space 2 by Lot 1 is wider than the open space down by Old Mill Village.
That's correct. So at least at that point, it's deeper. I don't know if the road carries straight where it will constantly be deeper. The developer may speak to that a little bit further, but it's roughly 40 feet, I believe, in the Old Mill Village subdivision.
So it's
And
about
I think
10
it gets about
feet
another 10 or
wider
15
at the-
feet wider at this point.
Okay.
And so that plays partly into possibly why that lot's more
So
narrow to provide for
optically,
open
it's going to
space.
look closer to an 80-foot boundary border for that lot. If you're looking from Old Mill forward, you're going to have that open space that's going to kind of build across that lot line.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know colloquially, as we went through this process months ago with the neighbors, they had primarily concern with the number of lots that were butting up against them, and so the developer consented at that time to create larger lots there at that time, and I think I don't know if this is exactly what that original agreement showed on size, but it's essentially what they were shown as well through that process, and they haven't been as involved since, but early on, when they first came in, there was a fair amount of neighborhood involvement.
Okay. I have a couple questions for Mr. Holland. So the first one is regarding parking within the subdivision here, because if I read it, the road is 26 feet wide, which means if somebody parks on the street, you can barely get 2 cars by, and if 2 people park opposite on the street, you're going to get 1 car through. How do you plan to accommodate for parking, on-street parking, or visitors?
So, yeah, I agree. The standard width for the driveway will fit 2 cars. And I don't know what the Kaysville requirement is for parking, but they'll all be 2-car or 3-car garages, and then have a driveway that can fit 2 visitor parks. Your next question is, what if they have a party? Yeah.
Well, no, yeah, I'm not going to put you to the extreme, but yeah.
But I think that we meet the parking, it's a standard subdivision with, homes that are standard homes with standard driveways, so there will be sufficient parking. But something we could look at is at the end of these stub roads, Lot 8, Lot 24, if that's something that the council might want to see, we could bring that back to final and play with a few items.
Okay. The other one is on the lots adjacent to the Old Mill Village. Will they have 5-foot side yards on those, or will they be 8-foot?
Jeez, good question. So they would fit under the development agreement, 5-yard setbacks, my favorite setback.
5 foot, so you plan that those larger lots would still have the smaller?
Yep.
Which would be...
Is that just buildable area, or, you're planning that you would put the homes
So,
one
yeah,
side to the other?
5 to 8?
A setback's a funny thing. So because you can go up to, 5 feet from your property line, doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
So these 80-foot lots, they could be 70-wide homes, absolutely. Will they be? I don't think so. 60 is probably a standard size, and that would be a 3rd-car garage, so a 60-foot wide home. So, yeah, but the development agreement allows 1 through 8 to be that full length, 5-foot.
I understand it allows it. I was just curious as to what your plans were for it.
So, yeah, I would say that's the plan, is if the homes need to maximize that, they can. If not.
Okay, and then my last question for you is, you talked about the other development, kind of the style or cost of the homes you expected with being 4,500 square foot lots. What do you expect in this subdivision?
Can I afford it? That's...
No.
Oh,
Well, Mayor, probably. This is, as you know, last year, a massive study was done in the state of Utah, and there were 60,000, a discrepancy in 60,000 households that don't have a home. This year, it's even worse. And I continue to run up with the problem. This is the reason I'm trying to get 5 lots instead of 3. 2008, 2007, 2000, this is a different era. This is what people want. They're willing to pay $450,000 to $500,000 to have a great house. They do not want to mow their yard. Hill Farms is a perfect example of that. So yeah, I think they're, $450 starting, which does not meet the affordability standard.
Not transients.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Okay, good. All right.
Okay, thank you.
There's no place for that. All right, Councilmember Tran?
I have a question. So your what did you call it, a crash gate? Crash fence?
Yeah.
Okay, so where would that go? Between 24 and 25, potentially? Or just as a second outlet to the...
we could look at that. That would be...
I know it's just really close to the main,
If fire's having the issue with it, then, yeah, that's if... And I've heard the stories, I've read the fire code book. they need secondary access just in case the primary access is blocked. So if the primary access is blocked, how do you get in here? Then, yeah, I think there could be a Plan B route through Lot 24 and Lot 25. Because one could say, well, let's put something between Lot 13, through there. But I think that defeats the purpose of the commercial use, what they're trying to accomplish, and the residential.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was just curious, is where that would go.
Okay. Councilmember Adams?
Thank you so much. I apologize for sailing your wind.
You took the wind out of my sails. Put that on the record, too.
Sucking that wind out of your sails. Your advice, or I can't remember how you said it, but you said, that the staff is coming with the advice that we try and have, that we recommend 2 outlets. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's primarily based on public safety, and their recommendation is essentially was alluded to by the developer of not cutting off 40 homes in the event that there's only one access. There are some concerns from a staff perspective as far as the proximity to the commercial road that was alluded to. But I think as we've looked at it in a little more detail, we're okay with it. The number of homes that are in there, probably the time frames when traffic would be heavy going to and from, I think it wouldn't create safety issues as far as proximity. But if it had a crash gate, and for practical purposes, that would, I'd have to speak with the fire chief directly, so I don't want to speak for him. Traffic-wise, I think we'd be okay at one point. We like less points on the road, less points of conflict. It's a safer road for Deseret Drive, and if that were sufficient for the fire chief, he doesn't like gates generally speaking, but if it were the alternate, perhaps that's enough, so I'll maybe end it at that and not pretend to know what he would think. Traffic-wise, we'd be okay with just one.
Yeah, I mean,
I
think from a standpoint of everybody, like living in there, you would love to have it just be the one, because your kids could ride their bikes comfortably around the one section. But what was staff recommending where that would be, or did they look at that? I mean, obviously the first spot I went to was same as Councilmember Tran, which was between 24 and 25 going out, which I think is also where you went, and the idea is that that's too close, and I get that, and it also makes 24 and 25 a little less appealing because they've got cars going by their house constantly. So my first question would be, did staff have a recommendation on where that would be? And then my second question is this a road behind Lot 1, 2, 3, 4 that's going to be put in to access the old Mill Village, or is that's what's already there?
Correct. That's a trail system. Well, there's no trail on it, but that was what it was originally intended for behind that. So that is certainly not vehicular access to the south. And then as far as staff's recommendation on where it would be located, no, we don't have a specific location to where we think it would be most appropriate. As long as there's a second way in, so far as the information that I have. So at any point, what's interesting about this subdivision, it's about 650 feet, I think, from the Deseret Drive point in to the very furthest point on any of the private roads internal to the subdivision. The PRED ordinance, I believe, allows you to be flexible on whether or not that's necessary, but the closest thing we have on the ordinance, which we stick to pretty regularly, I would say almost without exception, is we currently have a 600-foot cul-de-sac limit on a standard subdivision. So you're 50 feet beyond that at the farthest point, but anywhere, because you can't do it on the far south side and you can't do it on the west, any single point you put in another access is going to bring that even to the 600 or less. And so I think it would meet our ordinances wherever it happened to be, and I think they'd be okay. You've got a full public street likely that would come there along the north side that would be just as good to get access into as Deseret Drive. So long answer.
It's good answers, though. Mr. Holland, I mean, as far as emotionally, how do you feel about having this gate here? Would that work?
Well, it's a tough conversation. So behind lot 24 through 13, there is asphalt. So one could make the argument that lots 24 through 13 actually have the ability of a fire, if a fire arose on one of those lots, that it could be fought from the asphalt that's sitting, to the north of it. I mean, that's going to be a basic parking lot. So I think that it might need additional attention. There could be something else. If we talk to the fire chief, lot 27, that access point right there is probably 26 to a 30-foot right-of-way. We could look into making that larger. We could, have an island in the center, and so there's a right-in, right-out kind of concept. Mm-hmm. There's multiple things we could do. So if the council were to say, we love the plat, you got to work that out somehow, work with staff to come up with a secondary access or an emergency access, then I am more than willing to do that.
Yeah. So I think the point is, the developer's okay, we should just require that there be another access point somewhere and move it.
And that the fire chief approves it.
Yeah.
I feel like there's still some unknowns, though. I mean, I think
Of whether or not there needs to be another access point?
I just feel like we need to absolutely make sure, especially the length of the cul-de-sac, and this is more of a comment, but I'm going to say it, is that we had a very similar proposal a few months ago with similar amount of lots. It was an existing neighborhood having a new neighborhood tacked onto it, and the developer and the residents really advocated for the crash gate because they didn't want the traffic of the secondary access point, and it was determined by all of our public safety that was not in the best interest.
It was not a crash gate. What they were proposing was an actual gate that they would have to have a code to get in.
I think it's two different.
If it's, are we talking about the near the new assisted living?
No, different.
Okay.
Because I know what you're talking about. That was private. This other one was actually proposed a crash gate specifically just because they didn't want the access. And public safety decided that would not be sufficient. So that's what I'm saying. I just feel like there's still some unknowns. I feel like we're not quite sure what we need to require and where it goes, things like that.
We don't need to decide that. We don't have to decide that. All we need to do is say, we're not comfortable having one access, fix it.
Yeah.
And then they fix it.
Yeah. I feel comfortable with that.
Right?
Yeah.
So we don't have to figure out that tonight. They go and fix it. Okay? And then it's applied at final plat that, yes, we required a preliminary plat that it have two access points, and they fixed it. So that's all we need to do.
And that's when public safety would sign off.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe what I would say, for clarification, not to say pick one or the other, because I've heard different ideas, primarily from the developer. Do you simply want satisfaction of the fire chief that he's got appropriate emergency access? That could be one improved point of entry, or do you want it to be specific that it's two? One is just a little more broad than the other. If you left it just satisfy the fire chief, you may still say you need two, and we get that. So that just look for clarification from the council if you're heading that direction. If you'd like to be more specific or leave the broader end open, we can satisfy it in either case.
I think, and I don't vote, but it would seem to me that our professionals are able to figure this out. We don't have to be too restrictive. I think that they'll be able to find something that works. And I would just want to make sure that the fire chief is happy. As long as the fire chief is happy, then I'm happy. That's what I would say. But it's up to you, obviously. Councilmember Tran,
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that just be a given that the subdivision wouldn't be approved? If Chief Erickson says, no, you need two, well, then that would be required, right, by the city ordinance. So I'm just saying, do we have to say that? Do we have to include that?
You would be accurate in saying, if the reviewing entities haven't signed off, then it won't be approved.
Right.
But my personal feeling is specific direction from the council, because there is some discretion, in my opinion, with the fire chief and, not being the expert on the fire code and what he may or may not require. And knowing the council wants something, then, more specific, we'll make sure we get it exactly that. And so, again, that's where I say he may still require 2 accesses no matter what. I'm just not as familiar with that requirement. Councilman Blackman may have, more background on that.
Councilmember Blackham, what's your opinion?
Well, you said this is question time.
I'm asking you a question.
From being on the fire department for 35 years, we don't really like crash gates because our focus is emergency, and emergency that you're being called to, whether it be life safety or house on fire or whatever. And then you get there and the road's blocked and you have to go find an emergency access that you don't know whether you've got the code to or the gate key or whatever. And did somebody plow the snow in front of it? Has anybody been maintaining it? Can you even get through it?
Is there a trampoline there?
From a safety standpoint, public safety standpoint, we always like 2 accesses. That's why you always hear in the fire, 2 in, 2 out, and always look for your egress once you go in. Make sure you've got a second egress everywhere you go. I mean, that's just public safety, and that's what you asked. So, and like I say, in crash gates and those things, then they require somebody to maintain them. They require maintenance. And if you go around and you see the stub streets in the city or whatever, in the wintertime, you'll see the snow's all piled up against there, or people park their trailers there or whatever, and you can't use them anyway. And so that's from the fire standpoint.
All right, that's good. All right. So probably.
I have one question.
Yes, a question.
The question I have is for Nick. Okay, if the development agreement says that the lots against Old Mill Village will be 80 feet wide, now in our ordinance it says that the lot will be the width of the setback requirement, but not in this case. It doesn't say the lot has to have the width. It says the lot will be 80 feet wide against Old Mill Village. I just want to make sure we're not violating the development agreement by not having that 80-foot width on lot 1.
I think in this case, I agree with Lyle's assessment that we would look to how we traditionally measure lot width. And I don't think that at least the parties, Mr. Holland and the city, contemplated that they would go out necessarily at the southernmost portion of this. I think it's a better reading, and it would be, I think it's very reasonable to think that we would do that just the way we calculated any lot width.
And then the only other question I had, Lyle added, was this more than 600 feet, which is what we've held as standard with the cul-de-sac, center line to street with 600 feet. It's an annual forever, but we've never had anybody propose a cul-de-sac with 42 lots on it. So, and that's why I get concerned when there's one access, because all it would take is one car wreck at the intersection, one broke down car, and 42 people couldn't get to their homes. So you always worry about, when there's a cul-de-sac with 8 people, it's different than when you have 42, but you answered my question, I think.
Yeah, maybe just read it. I believe it's close to 650 as that distance.
And you can exceed that under the PRUD?
Yeah, so the PRUD just gives kind of open language that allows for flexibility from typical development standards. And so I would think that 600 feet would be our typical development standard, but you do not have to allow it. And so that's where I think, yes, in my reading, it's open, but it's also open on your end to say, no, we don't think it makes sense to go any larger. So it's simply to point that out.
Councilmember Adams.
Last question. I know we're dragging this, but Lyle, you mentioned that the city had also looked at Mr. Holland's concern about the gas line and the entrance of the commercial entrance and adding this road between 24 and 25. My thought is, could it be done? I mean, did the staff find that they could do that? That wouldn't be, I mean, I understand it'd be an issue, but it seems like with money and engineers, you can figure out just about anything. But is that one that they looked at and said, no, there's no way you can do this?
Can I touch on that, Lyle? I don't physically know if that's possible to have a full access between lots 24 and 25.
And we've not looked into it in enough detail as far as that depth on the gas line.
Because of the gas? Or?
In some respect, money can solve just about any problem in engineering in some cases, except that I believe the gas line is probably not pressurized, and you may not be able to modify it and move it. I'm not positive on that. So again, that's kind of the preliminary, final. We don't know those technical details at this point, and it could be that if that's not possible and we're saying provide a second access, then he just has to put it somewhere else, and
how are they
that's
doing
where
it
it
with
opens
this,
fine.
the initial entrance then? I mean, forgive my ignorance, but how are they getting over the gas line?
And we had to deal with this gas line issue before when they put it in, and granted, a regular asphalt road would not go over it, but they were able to put reinforced concrete over that and bridge across it, and that worked. And I think some of the commercial buildings in the business park have had to do the same thing over the gas lines that run through there. But I think there's always a way to do it through reinforced concrete and engineering that you can actually do that.
I wanted Lyle just to pull this up real quick. It's a big deal today. If you tell me you have to have a second access, I think that's heavier than you might be thinking. That lot 1, I can't remember what lot it is. The user here that's shown has a commercial access, full 66 foot wide to access their property. One of the reasons we have this plan in front of you is that they did not want the residential to access onto their commercial for their own public safety. And if you're talking, hopefully this all works, and 100 cars a day might be going to that facility. So then you're asking another issue. So if you require me to have, you got to have a second access. There's a bigger picture here. It's not just, and by the way, I wouldn't say that I have a cul-de-sac. That would be a loop road, and so it's a discussion that's deeper than just have a second access.
Councilmember Tran.
I just have a question. So you mentioned sort of I think what you're talking about is maybe sort of a roundabout kind of situation on the main access. Does that count as kind of, would that take care of it as far as?
What's the neighborhood on 200 North?
Green.
Across the street from Green.
Mountain Vistas?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Mountain Vistas has an island in the center, and then
it splits.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that could be an option that we could look at.
Okay.
So
I
it's still
think
just one access, though.
It's one access, but it has two side. There's
Yeah,
two.
exactly.
Does that
There's
count?
two openings. That's what I'm saying. Does that count?
Apparently not,
That doesn't
according
count.
to
Well,
our experts.
Yeah, I love the dialogue. I think that it goes back to, we can look at a lot of things. If you require us to figure it out with staff, that's something, because I don't know the fire code in my brain, but it'd be interesting to look at that and see if it would require me to do that. I don't know if it would or not. We could look at that.
And I certainly want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for the chief. I want him to speak on that.
All right. So here we are. Had a good discussion. So I think the question is, do we want to approve the preliminary plat as is? Do we want to approve it conditional upon having a secondary access? So those are, or deny it, which I hope.
What about
we
tabling
wouldn't.
it? Is that an option that means to table it until we receive information from the chief? Or?
Yeah, you would be welcome to table it for additional information, and maybe just to add another option. Again, you're welcome to choose what the council feels is appropriate, instead of specifically stating approved subject to the secondary access, approved subject to satisfaction of the fire chief, and which is likely a secondary access, but perhaps there is another solution.
So, all right, so.
Do you want to?
I don't know that getting any more information to this body is very helpful.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be up to the developer and staff to work it out if we are requiring that secondary access. So, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion
Councilmember Barber.
that we approve the preliminary plat approval for Deseret Landing subdivision, approximately 700 South, with the condition of approval from Fire Chief for safety.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Barber, seconded by Councilmember Tran. Councilmember Blackham.
Aye, because
Comments?
she
Oh,
threw
do we
it.
want comments?
Yeah, comments. It seems like we've been commenting.
State your
the whole
comment.
time. Okay, what's our
Okay,
comments?
really the only comment I have at this time is I think that secondary access, but leaving it up to the fire chief. I mean, for the other people, the people who live there, it's just annoying if something happens, but from a public safety standpoint, as long as you've got that in your motion, to have it approved by the fire chief for what he's okay with, I'm okay with that.
All right. Any other comments?
My
Yes.
comment would be, I really like what's happening here. This was the example I was referring to that has worked really well with residents. There's a nice buffer to the existing neighbors and some smaller lot sizes, which I think we need, and I think it works really well. I'm really excited about extra commercial, even more than we had required. I mean, there's so many good things happening here. I want to keep that momentum and communicate we're excited about this development. Let's make it work.
Councilmember
And I would
Blackham.
like to ditto what she just said. I think this is a good development for the area. And I think this is what we're talking about. You know, you take a bigger parcel of ground that doesn't affect the existing residents really. You come in and you meet the new general plan requirement as you see it. And I think it is a good thing. And that's the kind of thing that I think we're looking to see.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments?
My
Councilmember
last
Tran.
comment will
Yes.
just be that I also am really excited about this development. As Planning Commission, we looked at some other opportunities that were presented, and I'm really glad that our recommendations were, the City Council liked our recommendations as far as holding out for something that would really be great for the area. We feel like it's a great compromise between commercial and residential. We're excited about the commercial companies that are part of this opportunity, so I think it'll be great for the community.
Okay. All right. Let's vote. Okay, Councilmember Blackham.
Aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous. I think we're on a roll here with unanimous votes. All right, thank you. Okay, and now a discussion on UDOT.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I sound a little bit better than I did last time, but not by much.
Not much.
Yeah.
New voice, perfect.
I hope not. Yeah,
This is better. Have a quick smoke.
I might take that up. Might as well, right? Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing me some time. As you can see in the packet, what you have before you, October of 2018, we were first approached by the UDOT project team, and I'd like to welcome Mike Romero, Mike, I think you're a Davis High grad, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Go Darts.
As well as Russell Smith with the Oak Hills US 89 project team. Started coordinating with Russell in October 2018 about stormwater drainage along Highway 89. There is a limited number of locations for stormwater detention basins, flood control infrastructure along this corridor because it is densely populated. As you can see in the drawings there, UDOT has proposed a location for a detention basin on a parcel owned by the city and has proposed compensation to the city for such. We have had a couple of questions, and we decided that we'd like to bring that to council. I mean, obviously, we've got to bring it to you for your consideration. But to answer questions about this proposal from UDOT, their proposal for the compensation, which I believe is $710,000. It's an 11 and a quarter acre parcel. There's It's surrounded on either side by ravines, and then I think the Parks Department refers to the middle section. It's kind of a flatter area as the mesa. The mesa is about 2.5 acres, and I believe the detention basin is about 2 acres or just under 2 acres, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Russell? So yeah, this is a parcel that the city acquired some years ago. Plans have been talked about back and forth of what could be done there, parks or other options, but because of difficulty with access, nothing has ever come to fruition there. So with that, I'll kind of turn it over to you for any questions, as well as the UDOT officials are here to answer questions as well.
Okay. Mike, or Councilmember Blackman, whichever you...
You call me Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, so the questions I have are, obviously when you look at the percentages of water that's going in there, 45% is UDOT, 20% is Kaysville, and I think 30 or 35% is Fruit Heights.
Correct.
And what I look at is, I mean, you know, everybody wants to get $710,000, okay? No, I'm really looking for some money to get some firemen, right? Okay?
Exactly.
But there's also the issue of once you turn it into detention basin, then there's a lot of maintenance involved with those usually. And generally that means it's either going to be you or it's going to be Cole in the Parks Department. One of you is going to have to maintain that, so you're going to have to come up with people to do that, and that comes at a cost. And it might take special equipment, it might take special mowers that have the angles mower on them and stuff like that, or whatever you're going to have to do. And so I guess my question is why doesn't UDOT just want to buy the property from us, and then it's their facility, and they maintain it? Or if for some reason or another they don't believe they should own property or whatever, then if we do have to maintain it, not just the $710,000 that we're getting to build that, why can't we bill them for the maintenance of the detention basin in the agreement also? So those are just some of the questions I have. I mean, I realize there's a need for these facilities, but I see ownership in this case as not being the best thing, because it's just an ongoing maintenance thing. And that $710,000 is going to go away, but the need for maintaining the detention basin, and the way I read that agreement is if anything goes wrong with it, we're responsible for it. And so I guess I'd almost rather see them buy it, build it, pay us the money, and we'll do whatever for our 20%. So those are the questions I have.
And those are probably best answered by Mike or Russell. But essentially, the agreement that would be entered into, the current draft is, like Councilmember Blackham said, UDOT would design and construct the basin, and the city would be required to guarantee a minimum storage volume to UDOT and maintain that facility so that it continues to function as designed.
And the other thing that I have concerns about is liability. So when you're talking about us maintaining it, to some extent, I'm glad it's us maintaining it, because then we'll know that everybody downstream from there is okay, right? So that aspect of it, but again, it takes money to make sure that our residents are safe. Anyway, my ideas. Councilmember Lortz.
So with that, and kind of just conjunction, so is Fruit Heights going to be participating in the maintenance going forward, or is this a freebie that they just get to dump water in it?
I don't believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they'd be participating in this location.
Have we approached them to talk about it, or?
No, we haven't had any discussions with them.
Is it just because right now that's where the water is flowing through anyways?
Yeah, typically all of Fruit Heights stormwater ends up coming through Kaysville's conveyance system.
For free?
That's correct. I don't know.
To answer your question, Councilwoman, yeah, it's because of the lay of the land. It's just the nature. Sorry. It's just the nature of the lay of the land with the topography within the city limits. And like Josh said, that's just what, I don't want to say what we're dealt with here in the community, but that's the lay of the land. Okay, so if I understand, then UDOT is going to construct the facility, and then the $700,000, is that essentially meant to be a lump sum payment to manage the costs of that facility going forward?
That lump sum payment is compensation for the land and the storage of the water on the property. And typically on installations like this, the maintenance is once or twice a year mowing. So from an annual expenditure, you're probably looking at the $5,000 to $10,000 range annually. So if you look at $700,000 and you're looking at a $10,000 expenditure annually, that is fairly good conversation. And then we're also looking at an additional $180,000, $200,000 for design and construction of that the city's not responsible for, and that's for the city's portion of water. So a lot of this water is coming off the east side, coming down on UDOT's property, and with conversion of the highway to a freeway type system, that is no longer going to be allowed. So we can work together in a joint system, or we can tell Kaysville City that they need to take care of the water before it gets to our property. And if we do that, there's about $200,000 in design and construction costs just to capture your water from coming onto our road. And so what we like to do is work with the cities. You know, we're doing similar things with Layton and in Fruit Heights, where we go in, we spend the capital up front to build this pond. Right now, this pond cost is right around, do you know, Brian?
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. I mean, we're probably talking this pond's going to cost us $1 million to build when everything's said and done. And UDOT's covering all the costs associated with that. We're covering the costs for Kaysville City's portion of the construction. We're telling you we'll work with you to capture your water, get it into a system that's new, functioning, built to current standards, and in return we ask that we give you ownership of the pond and ask you to mow it or pick trash out of it once or twice a year, is really what those maintenance activities are.
And alluding to what Mayor Witt said, it's I don't want to say it's A and B, but there is a lot of benefit in the community owning it as the project's done to own it and maintain it, have control if there's a concern. So that, as well as modification going forward as development comes through and still meet your needs with the property. So all those were looked into account as we worked together with Kaysville City. Okay, just one more question for you then on this. Between the Kaysville Tributary Area 1 and Area 2, we've got a whole bunch of property there. When that becomes developed, I mean, where's that water going to get routed?
So if
or is it currently routed to, is it the other blue line that goes into the
so that
north?
is a piece of property that there's a proposed development being looked at there, and if you turn around here, we'll be requiring on-site detention for that property to capture that water, which would then be coming into the storm drainage system and coming into this channel here, so that it wouldn't be making its way into the detention basin.
So we've planned for future development where everything needs to go. And
correct, yeah. As part of the development process, we'll be looking at that.
Councilmember Adams.
Do you have questions first? Yes, a couple of questions maybe for staff. Like, where would the money go? Is it become a slush fund for that? I mean, you know, that's my number one question, my first question, because I know where I'm going to spend it. I'm just kidding. Library. Just kidding. So what were you going to say, Mayor? Did you?
No, I'm just going.
Oh,
all the things that we have a lot of capital improvement needs. We have a lot of
I guess that would be just my question. Does it go into a capital fund? Does anybody know where?
That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly on the accounting side of things.
Should have asked that.
As I mentioned in the staff report, we do have betterments that we've requested with UDOT as part of this project to support water quality issues. to the tune of about 300,000. That's not saying that guaranteed those monies would offset. Those monies are budgeted currently in the water department, so, and not something that we're necessarily, hey, we've got to have that to make this happen, but.
It doesn't get earmarked somewhere. I mean, that was just my first question. Are there any neighbors that this will affect? Do we need to, I know it's only a work item, right? So we'll move this to an action item, is that correct?
Right.
Will there be letters? I apologize, I may be just asking these questions that maybe you don't know, but from a work item standpoint, like, I'd like to know what the neighbors think, you know, I mean, that's always kind of one of the things that we'd like to know, and so I don't know if letters have been sent yet, or if this affects any neighbors.
I don't think there have been any letters sent. I don't know if UDOT has had any contact with neighboring residents. I haven't had any contact with anybody. To the south, our homes in Fruit Heights, they're at the top of Ward Road. And then directly west are several homes in the private development here.
Okay. So that would be my, I mean, as far as it being a work item, before we took it to an action, I mean, as part of taking it to an action item, if that's what our plan is, it would be that there be some notification and at least a chance to get the input from the surrounding neighbors to know, you know, if any of them are concerned about drowning, or maybe they want to hunt on this pond or whatever, I don't know.
Well,
What's that?
I'll just say that to some extent, here's the thing. I think notification, yes. Input, probably not, because this is something that is not optional, right?
Well, that was going to be my last question. If we didn't approve this, could you not just eminent domain and take the pond anyway from us? Take the land from us? Or is this something that I mean, I really appreciate what UDOT's doing here to try and work with us rather than hit us with a bill. I think that's awesome. I don't fully understand why they're spending, I mean, $1 million. That's awesome that they're willing to do that rather than have us spend $200,000 to take care of our water. What I don't fully understand is if we're like obligated to give it to them, or if.
Yeah. So if it falls under any sort of eminent domain action, you know, we have very limited locations to actually put this pond. There's a lot of development in the area. We really can't go to the north because of all the homes that are up there. We can't put it on the east side because there's no space to put it. When we look at these types of things, we generally look for open areas where we don't have to impact homes and property. We look at green spaces. We look at natural drainage channels as well. This kind of hits on all of those from there's no homes that we have to impact. There's natural drainage channels that we can get the water into and convey it through the system. So we look at those types of things. And so, I mean, we do have the ability to use eminent domain and acquire this property through condemnation. We would prefer to work with the cities and go through all that process because there's a benefit to both parties. You know, if we can work with you and help you capture your water and keep it out, and you guys don't have to pay that bill, and you guys can maintain it for us, it helps us out as well. And so we try to do this and get a win-win for all parties involved.
And thank you so much. That's, I mean, and that's one, I think the reason I wanted the answer to that question was that I appreciate that you're not just taking it, and that you're willing to work with us and make it a win-win.
But point is well made that surrounding neighbors should be informed of what's going on. And UDOT has been very good with public participation, and I'm sure that will happen.
And we have talked to the wards on the south side of the property. There's really not a lot of homes on the north side of the property. There's some under construction. We've had some contact with them, but there's not a lot of homes on the north side.
Great. Okay, so Councilmember Barber.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Only comment was that I think something we do really well in the city is take care of our water. We do a really good job with it, and I think it's great. UDOT's trusting us with this, and if this is a benefit that we can take for doing such a good job, I think we'll absolutely take it. I think it'll make everything work better. So that's a win. What are we looking for? Do we need a recommendation to move this to an action item?
Yes, if everybody is comfortable with the agreement.
The only thing I just ask is it unheard of for us to bill UDOT for something, for a maintenance for something for them? Is that unheard of?
Yes. And typically what we do is because we're funding the upfront construction for that, then, and paying, compensating for that land, that is the offset for the maintenance.
And just a quick question for Cole, do you have the means to maintain this? Because I know it'll be put on top of you. Do you have the ability to maintain that?
Currently, equipment-wise, I would say no. So that would be something that you'd have to consider as far as the capital.
What would you be looking at?
Well, a lot of it depends on how steep those side embankment walls end up being. If I'm looking at the plan right, where we call the Mesa the flat area, is that being recessed or is that building built up? Is that my floor?
The goal of mine is to do cut first, so recess. So as it comes off here, we're maintaining 3-to-1 slopes.
Okay.
To help versus sometimes you go up to 2-to-1, but we want to make it flatter.
Yeah. So to answer your question, we would need some equipment, but in a sense, we already need that equipment. We maintain the rail trail that we currently don't have equipment to do some of that side cutting. So,
do you foresee something of this nature adding to your workload, requiring you to employ more people?
Well,
because they're always being asked to do more.
You know, I guess we're already behind the 8 ball when it comes to staff, as far as, of course, always needing a few more. Now, this being be more of a passive, undeveloped property where it's not going to be a heavily manicured setting, more just natural grasses. They're correct in that those costs aren't that significant, but it does take time and manpower to do that.
And the other question I have for you, since it is a regional detention facility, they'll have to fence it, is that correct?
If the city desires to fence it.
We'll fence it, and then once it's fenced, public access will be limited. You won't be able to go into it and use it. So you can't use the area around it for like a passive park or anything like that? Or?
Well, there's really, the way the topography is for a passive park, since we do own that almost 11 acres, there's consideration for some trail networking that could come down in there and that type of stuff. So there are some things like that, but as far as a passive drive-to, the biggest limitation is there is no access to get people to with road access, and so that's always been a limitation in developing it to this point.
Okay.
But
thank you. Good question, but can we get that water, like for the second, how we use the irrigation water? Is there any way to?
That I don't have an answer for. It goes back to water rights and who owns it.
I mean, it seems crazy that we do not have it,
In some places, you're not allowed to have rain barrels because you're keeping that water from going into the aquifer.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, we could sell that water, we could.
Yeah,
it's beyond our scope of
anyway.
tonight.
It'd be interesting.
There are things that we can do to make it more maintenance friendly. We're more willing to work with the CBI, putting in native grasses that are low maintenance. They don't get too tall.
Well, it sounds like you're very open to working with staff and that.
And I think it is important to recognize that fact, like Cole said. The strain is already there, and while $10,000 a year isn't astronomical, it's money, and staff limitations as well as Public Works. We're out monthly to all of our detentions inspecting those, so an additional roughly $5,000 a year.
Yeah, I realize that's an impact on you also. Your guys
certainly an impact. So yeah, our desire in coming here was to see council's disposition and get kind of your input.
All right. Any other comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to move this to an action item.
No, I'll motion that we move work item A, UDOT drainage basin. I don't know if it's still a discussion, but just move it to an action item.
Do we need to have an official acceptance by City Council, or do we just say, you have your direction, go and do?
I think the moving to action is helpful because we then know that you're ready to see it. I haven't heard any I'd like it changed this way, anything like that. You're uncomfortable with the amount of money. If there's anything like that, it'd be nice to know. But if you're good with it as is, I think moving it to an action is the best course.
Okay.
And should we counter offer at $750?
Sure.
Are you guys good with 8, maybe? Huh? I mean, I'm a salesman at heart. Anyway, yeah, I say that we move it to an action item. And I would say, if I can add this to my motion, is that staff maybe look at some of the things that they would like to see as, added to that action item, whether it's, fencing or things that we, like Mayor pointed out, that we aren't really in the position to discuss right now at this time, but if they see things, that they add that to the action item and that neighbors are notified.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Adams and seconded by Councilmember Blackham. Any comments?
One comment.
Yes.
Just to staff, I would say, in our recommendations, it's that safety is top priority, whether that's fencing, whatever it looks like, make sure that's top priority, and then neighbor notification as well. But I think safety, having that really nailed down, we do trust UDOT. They're very familiar with the safety procedures, but that's awesome.
I would comment on that also, that the staff really needs to look at this, and we want to go with staff's recommendations, because, that's really where we're going to be coming from, is what staff tells us that they need or want. And I know staff's going to look at it. If every day was nice and sunny and 80 degrees, that's great, but when you have to get into these facilities when it's 30 below and blowing snow and that, we need to make sure there's a good access to it and they have the ability to get to it and they can get in there and do things, because if anything plugged the outlet of the basin, it could cause a lot of problems for everybody. So that's why I say just work with staff very carefully.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to a vote. Councilmember Adams?
Aye.
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 All right, motion is unanimous again.
Yeah, we got to mess that up.
I know. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We had some last time.
Okay, Big Shots Golf Incentive Discussion. And
Thank you.
who is going to, Lyle, do you want to lead us in that?
I'll be very brief. I'd probably just start by introducing Mr. Randy Douglas. He's here representing Big Shots. He was hopeful to speak to the council briefly, brought some slides, essentially what's in your staff report, but wanted to talk about what their business is, and then I'll make some comments after as to what we're looking for from staff, what kind of direction we're interested in from the council.
Okay.
So with that, Mr. Douglas.
When you said brought someone, I thought you were going to say golf clubs.
We get to have a putting range right here. That would be awesome.
One thing I do want to say, if you have trouble deciding where you want to spend that $700,000, I can tell you.
Get in line.
Mayor, council members, by the way, congratulations, and I also commend you, because I know what time commitments it takes to serve on city council. So to those of you that are new and the incumbent, again, my commendations to you for your time and effort. A little bit about Big Shots Golf. First of all, we're very excited about this opportunity. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the presentation that we made to the Planning Commission. So I've thrown together just a very, very brief overview of Big Shots. First of all, Big Shots is owned by Apollo. Apollo is probably the largest private equity company in the country through one of their divisions called Club Corp. They are managing the Big Shot division. Club Corp happens to be the largest owner of golf clubs and health facilities in the country. I don't know if you're familiar with our competitor called Topgolf. Topgolf started about 18 years ago and has become a very successful venture. In fact, they will be going through a multi-billion-dollar IPO later this year. Well, what we've done is taken a look at Topgolf and the success of that, and have taken the same golf entertainment concept but significantly improve the technology so that it allows for a lot more interaction between the diversity, I should say, of the people that utilize the facility. They're two-tier facilities ranging from 42 to 60 tee boxes or bays, and will also include multiple event rooms, party rooms, and so forth. So just a picture of what one of the facilities looks like as you're looking from the fairway onto the facility. The next picture, or the next slide, just goes through and kind of outlines that whether it's a family, whether it's the avid golfer, or whether it's just the social aspect. Because I love golf. I do a lot of it when time permits. And the only thing I didn't like about Topgolf was because of the RFID chip embedded inside the golf ball. When I pull my 7-iron out, it'd only go about 70% of the distance that I usually get. Might only be 70 yards, but whatever. With this technology, you use regular golf balls, and every time, whether you're playing games or whether you're out to practice, every time you hit a golf shot, it tells you how far it went, how high it went, what the spin of the ball was. It gives you great feedback. So for the avid golfer, it becomes a tremendous opportunity to improve the game. And then there's just the social aspect, as the next slide shows, of just individuals being able to sit around, have a good time, play a variety of games, have food and drink, and socialize. So, next slide, please, Lyle. As you've seen earlier, first of all, I'd like to commend the developer. Thanks for staying. He's been very good at working with us and accommodating us. And if it needs to be, as you're looking at his plot of land, if it needs to be that there needs to be access into any of that area, hey, that's fine with us. We were just concerned when we first started talking to him because our hours are going to be from 8 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the morning on weekends. And we didn't want to have that constant flow of traffic going through a residential area. So if there needs to be a secondary access that involves coming into the main drive into Big Shots, I just wanted the council to know we're fine with that. But as you can see, kind of the layout there, all of the concerns we had as far as the height of the poles, 160 feet, making sure that we had adequate parking to meet the requirements of the city. In fact, we'll probably be putting in about 15 or 20% more parking than the city requirements. And next slide, if you would, Lyle. Just an overview of what the building will look like. And it'll be certainly one that will add to the decor of the area. We want to make sure it's a professional and appealing building as well. Very quickly, just the first and second floor plans. It's going to have a restaurant on the first floor as well as the kitchen. Upstairs will be a number of party rooms and so forth. There's the meeting rooms, just a couple that are in existing. So you've got an idea. Those are all going to be able to have accordion doors so we can take big rooms and make them into small rooms if the need requires it. So to let you know what we're anticipating, based on similar facilities, we think we're planning on doing a 54 tee box model, and we estimate that it's going to be about 50% usage. Now what that means is throughout the week, we say, okay, how often will each bay be used? On evenings and weekends, we plan on it being close to 100% usage. On a Tuesday morning, it might only be 20 or 30% usage, but all our numbers are based off of a 50% usage, and we estimate that it'll be 600,000 to 800,000 visitors, guests that come every year. Revenues will be somewhere between 8.5 and 9.5 or $10 million, and we've done three different pro formas to determine what that range would be, and that's why I've got up there the 8.5 to 9.5 or 9.8 million. If we took what Topgolf does in Salt Lake and used the same cost per bay, that annual revenue number would be about $12.8 million. So we think we're being conservative, but we also want to be realistic. It's a new concept here in northern Utah. We say that we'll be drawing from about a 40-mile radius. We say that because that's our franchise radius. If there's another big shot's put in within 40 miles, it'd be us that'd put it in, but that covers us all the way from Brigham City to Woods Cross. And so we think Kaysville is a great location, kind of in the center of that area. Construction costs, not counting the land, we estimate to be about $12.5 to $13 million. Will require 10 to 12 months to build. We would hope to be able to start building as soon as the spring of 2020, therefore opening sometime early spring in 2021. We've got modest profit forecasted for the first couple of years. I mentioned the hours of operation. We'll have about 120 employees, and evenings and weekends, as you would expect, would be the busiest. So a little bit of background. Back in 2017, Mayor Witt, I met with your predecessor, and we discussed the opportunity to come into Kaysville, and we, along with our partner, Better City, discussed what opportunities might be there. We received from the city, from Mayor Witt, in February of 2018, a letter saying, hey, we'd love to have you come. We don't know what we can do economically, but please give it some consideration. We replied, we'd like to do that. We'll look at sometime within the next 18 months to 4 years. Well, when this opportunity came along to work with the present development, to work with Mr. Holland, that's our plan going forward. So what we want to do tonight, realizing that there's an action item or a discussion item, we don't expect any resolution, but we'd like to know if the city council would consider coming back and finding some way to assist with some of the costs, whether it's deferred or decreased as far as the impact, getting utilities and so forth, assistance with the road that'll go from Deseret Drive actually into our facility, sales tax credit, property tax relief. I mean, I could go on, but I realize that for many of you, tonight's your first night to be sitting here in official capacity. But I wanted to be able to get a sense from the group as to the reaction and how much excitement there would be from the city council, so I can go back to my partners and say, look, we don't have any definitive answers right now. We've got to pull the trigger with Phil here within the next couple of weeks. So we realize, a definitive answer from you. But I did want to get a sense as to what the city council thought, what questions you had for me or for our group, and with that, All
right. Thank you. And I will lead off and just say that I've had people contacting me saying, we really, really, really want Big Shots to come. That never happens. You know, I'm always getting phone calls saying, don't do this and don't do that. But I'm getting phone calls saying, you're gonna help Big Shots, right? You're gonna help them, right? So that's what I'm hearing from the community.
Thank you, Mayor.
So be interested to hear what council has to say. Michelle, Councilmember Barber.
I will second that I think Kaysville is the perfect place for this to come. I think location-wise, we're right in the heart of there's a need for destination attractions like this. Obviously, you're right next to a really awesome one. We love boondocks, but there's like a different market that's constantly there. I saw in your thing that it said, 40-mile radius, but I've driven much further to go to Topgolf many times. And I think a lot of people would do the same the other way. So I think that it's a really exciting use of this piece of land. And I'm really glad, especially because we've been here when we had lots of different proposals come through. I'm really glad we're holding out for the right use here. And so I want to be as welcoming and acceptable to this, and I still want to make sure it fits within the surrounding area. It's a benefit to the city. So I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I will echo my excitement for having this in our community. My only question is, can I drive a golf cart while I'm doing that? It's the only reason I go golfing.
Well, we could, if you want to do a side job, we could put you out in the ball retriever. And then everybody would aim for you instead of the targets on the head. Hey,
maybe too many residents would enjoy that, so let's not do that.
Or we could have an annual mayor out in the...
Oh, gosh, that would be, and we'd all chip at the mayor, yes. Fundraiser, it's actually a great idea.
The museum.
Get in the car.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we're open to all sorts of ideas.
Great.
So, yeah, I haven't been addressed.
In this portion...
In this work item, we're okay?
You're okay.
I, echo what Councilmember Barber said, Mayor, nothing but excitement for this project. I think the only frustration is that I said that there should be a Topgolf there like 3 years ago, and so I think that, anyway, just think about that. I just want to echo what Councilmember Barber says, that we are super excited about it. We want to make sure that everything fits. I mean, water is the first thing that comes to my head is drainage, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we'd figure all that out. The other thing would be the lights, making sure that they're not shining in these beautiful new homes that are going to be going in, and I'm sure that they've figured that out.
Put up that plot. I had a slide in the other presentation that I had, but if you'll go back to this one, the lights, while we have the poles, there's no lights on the poles.
Oh, okay.
All of the lights are on top of the building, and the photometrics is such that they all shine out and down, to where we also want to make sure that we do not have blinding lights in the eyes of people driving down I-15.
Freeway, yeah.
And so forth. So there's the slide. So the photometrics that is done on that, there's a set of 4 big set of lights that are on top of the building. So that is not a concern. We would be hitting north. So if anybody would be impacted, it would be only those that are coming out of the neighbor, coming out of boondocks and getting in their car. But even then, I've been to facilities that are in very much residential areas, and it has not been a concern to any of the neighbors. But thank you for allowing me to expound on that.
Out of the ball, if you're not having a chip in there, one of the popular games at Topgolf is to hit it and have it land in a certain area, and you gain points and things like that. I don't expect you to tell me all the engineering, but
I'm curious. Hey, I'm glad to talk about it. I'm excited about it. In fact, I kind of owe a favor to Topgolf, because if you ever watch a golf tournament and they have up in the corner Top Tracer Golf, and you see Phil Mickelson hit a ball and it traces it, well, that's the technology that we use, so that every tee box has its own radar, so to speak, Doppler radar, that takes every ball and tracks it. So first of all, it makes it so we have about a 99.9% accurate rate, because it seems like when I'm down at Topgolf, every time I get a good shot, it's one that didn't count.
Yeah.
But so it is completely different technology, so it is a regular golf ball.
That's cool.
So it is going to be a Callaway golf ball, Callaway clubs that will be there for you to use, and it'll be, or you can bring your own, but it is just an actual standard golf ball.
Well, I can tell you from I'm a recreational golfer, so my wife would like to go golfing with me, but she likes to be more social than golf provides, because you're just, and so this
marriage.
is a perfect thing for her, because she can sit, eat, and if she doesn't want to hit, she doesn't have to, but she's not left behind, and she doesn't have to worry about anybody behind her pushing her. So it's a great concept there. I mean, for me, the only things I know you want to see about what kind of financial incentives we can provide, just understanding the whole overall taxing structure in Utah. We're like, these limited. As a city, we do not have a ton, but whatever we can do, I certainly, from my perspective, would love to see you come in there. I love the development. I think this is going to be a home run, or a hole-in-one.
Hole-in-one.
In Kaysville.
We'll see when I go golfing, I always wear,
You're on fire.
so that you'll know whenever I go golfing, I always wear 2 pairs of pants, in case I get a hole-in-one. But anyway, any other comments or?
Yeah. Very good.
Well, people always say that they worry about businesses on Deseret Drive because the access from the freeway is poor. And I've always said, it is until you find something that's destination-driven. If you have something that's destination-driven, people will go there. And I think that this is the right fit for what we're talking about. It's destination-driven. You're not going to go say, well, which golf place should we go to tonight? It's going to be that one, okay? And the other one is just for, there's a lot of families around in the area that may not, but is your restaurant going to be open to the public to just come
Oh, certainly. It'll be a public restaurant, and if there's something that one of my partners that's over the food and beverages, it will be very good food. Okay. He comes out of the Marriott Corporation, and when it comes to customer service, that's really, having been in marketing and sales for 40 years, it's going to be customer service to where when people come, they will leave having had a good time. If there's complaints, we will address them, and the food will be outstanding. So it's a 290-seat restaurant.
Oh, good.
In addition to what's out on the tee boxes themselves.
Okay.
A sit-down restaurant.
And then,
yes,
in Kaysville.
a sit-down restaurant with a very good
that's
menu.
great. I think
Another
the
one.
community would be very open to that. And then, obviously, are you going to give us kind of an idea, or are we going to get something? I mean, have you gotten a pro forma from them or anything?
We haven't really got a pro forma. We've talked extensively. We met as an economic development committee yesterday.
Okay.
And that was what we were kind of hoping tonight, was to get, if there was a sense of excitement about this, if it was something favorable, we were going to immediately start to engage with Davis County and the school district and just start those conversations.
I think we're all really excited to see this, but what we want to see is obviously how many jobs it creates, and you've already said that, and what kind of paid is it. I mean, we're always looking for places for our kids to be able to work and locally and things they like to do. That's not always pulling weeds, sorry. But, and so I think, but we need to kind of have an idea. Are you looking for tax increment off the property or whatever? I think that's kind of what, maybe that's getting too into it right now, but I think that's
in
really.
the weeds for now. Yeah.
Is that too much for now?
In the weeds.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
let's not.
But I think everybody's really excited and they're willing to listen to what you've got. I think they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you have 5 annual memberships up here.
For the golf cart. Only.
I just one thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned about going with your wife. The other thing that I will just mention is literally you could have somebody in a wheelchair, could wheel them out there, and we'll provide them a slingshot. Because there's a game that is called pinball, so that if you've got a 3-year-old child that comes with you, if they can hit the ball from here to the table and get it off, on the screen, it'll engage some flippers so that it'll flip that ball around, they can score, so that your 3-year-old can come out and play dad or play mom and have a very enjoyable
Beat
time.
you, probably.
Yeah.
I'll bring my 3-year-old.
So-
We'll see.
This will probably be something that maybe you'll address later, but something that maybe, if I could give like, something that I would like to have answered as it's an action item is how it's going to affect our police force, the guy that's pacing in the back. I just imagine that a place like this will require there to be some attention as far as the police force goes, or, I mean, have you done any studies as far as like what your other locations have required as far as crime and as far as, because there's going to be obviously drinking and, not that causes crime, but I mean.
No, excellent question. And fortunately, the two that are open currently, and by the way, Apollo and Club Corp plan on having 40 built within the next 3 to 5 years, to where Big Shots Golf will become as big in 5 years as Top Golf has done in 20 years, simply because when you've got a $72 billion conglomerate kind of helping in building a lot of these and pushing it, it will help. But going back to your question, we haven't had a lot of problems, but I do know that the Vero Beach, which we were out, had an off-duty policeman that was there as much as a deterrent as it is for actual need to step in and solve any problems. We are going to ask the city to help support us in getting both a beer license and a liquor license. The liquor will only be sold in designated areas. We will not have individuals without the wristband designation to be able to have access. I don't want my grandchildren to be there sitting next necessarily to somebody that has access to liquor. So that will all be very much controlled according to the tee boxes that they're allotted and whether or not they want to participate in adult beverages.
Great.
Thank you for the question.
I think just going through this, as I was looking at our ordinances, the variance for the pole height of 160 feet, is that because they're considering the pole to be part of the building?
So we took that before the planning commission simply because it wasn't that clear. We felt it was better to do with that. Yeah, whether a pole is a building or not, we wanted them to look at it through the conditional use process. So they've considered that previously. Felt it was a safer play.
And so then just moving on, I mean, the next thing is support of obtaining a liquor license, which I think we've talked about. I think I'd like to see just the process of what we go through for that, but I think we're open to it because it fits the.
We'll support you.
It fits the
Absolutely.
need, and I think it'd be a great asset in the community. Signage, I have no idea about that. Do we?
Well, I just noticed when I was scouting it out that when I got off of I-15, every time I went to make a turn, there was a sign that said Boondocks this way. And I'm going to say, hey, I don't know if that was something Boondocks had to get city
should have
council
asked before.
approval for or whatever, but I'm thinking.
Steve Hyatt just went ahead and.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I would hope that we would be able to do something similar.
Yeah.
I'll ask Steve.
Yeah. or you do ask. You just do it. It is a really good idea. Yeah. And the name of Big Shots Drive, I think, is a good
Well,
idea.
and the reason for that is trying to find this location tonight. I put it into my Google Maps, and when I started putting just the address, I came up with one in Massachusetts. But when I put in to find the address for this meeting tonight, Google said it didn't exist. So my thought, or our thought is as soon as it becomes a named street, and somebody says, I want to go to 122 Big Shots Drive, I want it to be able to.
There's only one of those.
There's only going to be one of those in Kaysville for sure.
And then maybe, Lyle, just on the impact fee reductions, the possible TIF district, can you define what that is?
Yeah, so, and that's probably where I wanted to speak just generally. I think we've got the majority of the feedback we're looking for is that there is interest in considering something, so we would put together with the Economic Development Committee some more details for you and provide that. But generally speaking, all of the options that you would see before you, the intent is not to give away and hurt the existing base of the city and finances, but anywhere there's a gain, we could share in that, so it could be mutually beneficial with the business. So where we may be making $10 a year in taxes on it now, this comes in, maybe there's $100 in new taxes, so what do you do with the difference? We could keep some, they could keep some. And that's the idea behind tax increment financing is there's new revenues, don't give away what we've needed and used in the past, but what can you do with some of the new stuff that might come to the city, sales tax considerations or others.
So is it too late to do an RDA or a CDA so that you could get the other entities to also participate?
Yeah, so we would still be able to do that. It's a slower process, and we've mentioned that, I think, with our committees. We talked about it and kind of informed big shots that if there's interest in doing these, it takes time to set up. It is not currently in a defined area that's eligible for the tax increment, but we could set one up. And so I think from what we're hearing tonight, we'd immediately go forward and start working with the county and other taxing entities and begin a conversation. They participate in that or may participate in that. They can choose. There's a number of ways to set it up, which, again, is where we'll have to get into the details. But the idea being Kaysville City is only a piece of at least the property tax puzzle. Other entities within the county may find that it's beneficial to them as well long-term to participate and are willing to do so and regularly do on something of this nature, so we could begin that conversation.
I mean, I'd like to see it pursued that direction, just because then I know the county and the school district are all buying into it, and it then shows that, and I think one of the things the county is always open to, especially when it creates jobs.
That's right.
I'm just going to ask my two colleagues to come up as well. I think all of you know Adam, or at least you might do. He's with Better City. He was the one that contacted Topgolf 2.5 years ago, and Topgolf said, sorry, we only go into markets of 1.2 to 1.2 million or bigger, which is how we then became familiar with this opportunity, and this piece of land was through Better City. And Matt here is our contractor and also a partner. Lives here in the area. He'll be the one that will be working with the zoning people and the city people and so forth. But comments, if I can be so bold from either of you.
I just wanted to say that I certainly appreciate that, a lot of people probably come and have their hands out, and often it can be perceived as, well, everybody wants to make more money or save more money. One of the aspects that I deal with a lot on these projects is the financing aspect. And probably the biggest challenge that we have on these type of deals is a single-use building. And as excited as we all are about it, and we are very confident in the success of it, bankers are constantly looking at it from a logical, what happens if this goes vacant? And I just want to express how huge it is as a feather in our cap if we get commitment from the city going into these lenders and what it does to show the support of the city and their confidence level for saying that, okay, this is something we can put our time into and get this approved for these guys, because we don't have any doubts with the city. We don't have any doubts that there's going to be some major upcomings. And then on top of that, it's a timing thing too. That just moves everything along a lot faster for us too. It opens the door to a lot more even short-term lenders and things like that when we have the participation from the cities or other agencies. So I appreciate, and I feel like I get the sense you guys are in the position to do what you can. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Anything, Adam?
And I don't know if I could add anything to what Matt and Randy have said, but just that I'm as equally excited to be here. It's been a really long, drawn-out process to try and get to this point. It's been a dream of mine to have Randy here with his group presenting in front of City Council and in a position to hopefully move forward with something that I think is a really good fit for this property. And Councilmember Blackham's exactly right. When we looked at this property 3 years ago, it was like, what's going to go here? And it's just been a real journey to find a really appropriate use that's complementary synergistic with surrounding businesses, and I think would really be a great family infrastructure amenity for Kaysville as well.
All right.
Any questions for the addition?
No,
Thank
but
you.
we appreciate you coming down and presenting, and I just want to give my commitment that we will do everything that we can to help bring Big Shots here.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. And now,
Someone need a motion?
yes, I guess.
I want to make a motion. I didn't get to say anything, so.
Okay, go ahead.
Go, Tammy. I'm really excited about it. Planning Commission was super excited, and we asked them lots and lots of questions, and they were able to answer them and address them. And so I just want to echo that I'm very supportive and very excited about this, and I'll make a motion to move this to an action item, right? Is it action or is it?
Or are we just giving direction
item?
this time?
It can be either one. I don't think we'll be ready for this at the next
Okay,
council
so
meeting,
just,
but
we don't need a motion.
So at this point, we've given them direction,
Okay.
and they will bring back
would be
something
You'll get with
as
Pete.
necessary.
So it's not on the
he came to
February
the
1st?
Okay.
or-
Yes, but, thank
So it
you.
won't be ready for February 1st, you don't think?
I don't think
You
so.
don't think, okay.
Okay. All right.
Well, not that we would. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, now, best for last, strategic plan update. Thank you.
You're leaving?
He sat through all of yours.
It's so fun.
I know, and he used this plan to advise them on what to talk about, I can tell. Yeah. All right, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that warm welcome and excitement, enthusiasm. So I'm here to talk about the strategic plan, an update and a preliminary report. I had an hour set aside, but I'll do it in 5 minutes. Okay? I'll cover 3 areas: the strategic plan purpose and components of the strategic plan, the strategic plan design and development process, and then finally next steps for us and for the City Council. My intent isn't to go into a deep dive into the data and have that discussion, but more so to review the process, the outcome, and like I said, the next steps. Is this the laser pointer? All right. So first, the purpose. Strategic plan, the purpose of that is to identify what's important to the city and why it's important to the city. And when I say city, I mean the residents of the city. It provides a framework for understanding and for decision-making. It also helps communicate to the community and informs goals and objectives and guides the strategy and development. I look at you, right, Lyle? All right. So the content or the components of the strategic plan that we're developing are, 1, the mission, and this is the what and the why, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but just to lay the framework for it. The vision, which is aspirational, the how, more of the ideals of what Kaysville aspires to be, and then guiding principles, and those are the values, the culture, the ideals that can help implement the mission and the vision statement. So the process, how was this developed? Throughout our process, it was an iterative process where at each stage we sought input from the public, from the citizens. The objectives and directive of the strategic plan were that they were to be developed for the citizens of Kaysville by the citizens of Kaysville. And so you can see here really four steps in this process. One, first, big overview, then I can talk a little bit about these. Gathering and identifying those objectives, and then the outreach. One-on-one interviews with a broad cross-section of the community, from elected officials to community influencers to old to young, east to west, north, south. We tried to hit a broad cross-section of the community. Derek and I did the interviews, and then the mayor, Shane and Lyle, also did interviews, and then we compiled that data and we analyzed it and synthesized it down to key themes and insights, which informed the broader public outreach, which we took out to the community. I'll talk about that, how we did that to, again, further understand what we were hearing and narrow it down. And then community survey, that influenced the survey that we went out to the public. So if I could talk briefly about those and, again, give an overview of those. So the dialogue that we heard, like I said, we analyzed that, synthesized that down to key themes and insights from those interviews. And you could see things that came to the top, right? And so we won't get into this, but just identified big picture what people thought or what their feelings and opinions were on what Kaysville is, what it should be or what they'd like it to be, and then an I wish. So we had a question set that was developed, and questions were asked to each person that we interviewed. And from that, we pulled these key themes, right? And this page and the next page is what I was referring to. I thought Phil educated them on, because that hit a lot of these, right? Which would be the point of this type of strategic plan, right? To see if you have alignment with the needs, desires, goals, vision of your community. So key themes and insights heard here, when asked what should be the key focus areas for the community's future and what's important to you about Kaysville now and it plans for the future. In fact, not just the last agenda item, but everything I've heard could tie back to a lot of these things, right? Roads, infrastructure, traffic, parks, rec. And so we saw these things surface. And then went to the broader public, as I said. This we did at 3 events. The 4th of July, breakfast at DATC, the Kaysville Stroll, and then the Affordable Housing Open House, and then that board was in City Hall for a couple weeks. So we did 3 different events, 6 different boards. The colors segregate age and geography, east-west. That informed a workshop that we had with the City Council, the Planning Commission, and then our advisory group. We reported the data back and prototype submission, vision, and questions for the survey. Our objective in the survey was to hit a cross-section of the community. And so we had questions about where people identified where they lived. Our target was to get across that 380 that spanned the city, so we had good representation. You can see the left. We actually got 705 and had great representation from every geographical area of the city. Again, that influenced our mission and vision statements that we were prototyping, and I won't go into those. They've been provided in your materials, but a mission statement, we seek to identify 5 elements of that, and that would be what makes Kaysville distinct, what's the differentiator, what are the citizens' needs we're looking to fill, who are we building it for, and why, and then what are the methods or tasks to accomplish that. The vision, as I said, aspirational. We're looking to identify 4 elements, and that's, again, what the city does, what are their outputs, what's the unique twist, who is it for, and how's it relatable, human, real-world aspect, and that's why it's important to understand those you serve so that you have a vision people get excited about and say, I want to be part of that, right? And then the guiding principles, again, values, cultures, ideals. And so this is to support the mission and vision and provide guidance, inspiration, and focus, right? And so we felt like, you want to go to the next slide? We got tremendous input and support. Shane, Mayor, Lyle were excellent in collaborating on this. Many of you were as well. I talked to Mike, I even talked to you and interviewed you at Smith's, and I don't think you even knew it, but you gave me a lot of good input.
Were you recording it?
No.
That could be a problem.
No, I did not record it, but I remember it. Yeah. But yes, great input, and we felt like we came up with some draft mission, vision statements and guiding principles for consideration for the council. Want you to consider how you can use the mission and vision and guiding principles along with the data. As I mentioned, we're not going into a deep dive here. I will answer questions, but we do have a lot of data, and they will be included in the appendices of the final report. But that will be helpful in prioritizing projects, initiatives, making decisions, right? Okay. Go back. All right. I guess we're here. All right. Yeah. So tonight, I guess we'd ask you to get us feedback, get it to you, Mayor, Shane, Lyle, and then put it on the agenda for next city council for hopefully adoption of this, right?
Right. Right. And hopefully, we do have new council members here, but the whole purpose behind doing this is from our people. It's kind of the guiding principles as we go forward, what our policies are going to be, how we want Kaysville to look and feel, and this is going to help inform our decisions. And obviously, this is just our maiden voyage as far as strategic plans are concerned. What we'll do is it has to be continually evaluated and updated and see how it fits, how we use it. And I would love for us to be able to look at this as the checklist from our residents. These are the things that matter the most to us. And so it actually gives us it gives us direction in a real way of how our citizens are feeling. So I'm excited. This is one of the things that I was talking about 3 years ago, and it's fun to finally see it in a real format here. So yeah.
And I would just briefly add to that, the mayor and staff, council drove the process, however, did not drive the content. We made assumptions at the beginning and had ideas, but those were checked throughout, and I think some were confirmed, but others really opened up some more discussion and dialogue and refined it down. And I feel really what we have is representative of the community and their needs and desires.
Mm-hmm. And yeah.
I think this is fantastic. One thing I'm excited to see is how we can make this available to residents. Put it on. I like when I go to other cities' websites and I can see their vision and I can see all the data that went behind it as almost, like you said, an appendix, because it needs to be there, but that's not really what people care about.
Infographics.
Care about the very most, but see, okay, this is it, because even the diagram with the stickers on it, as I was making decisions last year, which I knew it wasn't final, but it kind of gave a really good view of this is what residents really value. They care about infrastructure. They care about connectivity. And so I think that would be excellent, because then we can, I don't want to say back up, but then we can just show our decision-making processes based on citizen feedback.
And tie it to our strategic plan. So when we do have, when we're talking about big shots, one of the things that people, they want more events, they want, things to do.
Yeah.
That's
opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are
working on it.
Noticing that, check, this meets that need. And so I think that any of our policy decisions, we should be able to tie back to our strategic plan.
Okay. Yeah, it's great input, and I will add, we did scope and the council approved a budget item and we'll have to talk about what we want that to look like, but strategic plan live, like an interactive part of this on the website, and where we go with that, or infographics, or what that looks like. But I think, you want it to be a livable document, right, that's engaged and people understand. So,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Michelle.
Thank you.
And so, any other comments at this time? Okay. So,
I mean, just excellent.
Yeah.
Job at just telling us.
Sorry.
Lyle has a comment.
If I may, Mayor, I apologize.
Yes, please.
I skipped a slide that Mr. King had shared with me ahead of the meeting, and I failed to have it while he was ready to share it, but this is kind of the homework we're looking for from the council. So just to reiterate.
That's what I was going to say.
If you
now
can-
I have my homework to do.
Now you have your homework, so if possible, and if there's feedback that, we need more time or something like that, let us know. But we were thinking, from my perspective, and I think you addressed this, I don't know if the results are what you would expect or is, but that's the data from the public. So a lot of it you may not be able to change. That's just what they said.
Yeah.
But if you have comments on anything that you need some clarification with, it could be presented differently, and in particular those vision statements, as he mentioned, and mission statements, you could feed that through us as staff, and we'll try to have something that's clean and ready to look at next time.
And none of it's binding, right? Like, this isn't, there's nothing in there that's saying, like, you just agreed to this, and now you have to, allow for this home to be there. I mean, like you said before, I think that's the beauty of it being livable, but isn't this more just information?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. There's nothing here that mandates you or binds you to any specific course of action, but it should hopefully give you a guide and basis to help make decisions.
Which I think is fantastic, because I will say that a lot of the times the stuff that we get presented before us, emotions are high for the people that are around, right? And so it's good to know we're not just getting the input of just the people who live close by, which I still feel like we should consider always, but we're getting kind of a general idea of like, well, maybe 90% of the people want this and 10% don't, but the 10% are the ones that are here. This gives us kind of an idea of what the 90 want.
Yeah, you're right, John, absolutely. So, and I'll just comment on, in your draft that was emailed to you, there's 2 prototype missions and 3 vision statements, and then some guiding principles that we're looking to refine into one of each, right, and then a few guiding principles. So that's what we'll be doing.
So when do you think you'll have that document ready for us to look at with the refinements, or you want us to make it?
Yeah, it's ready for you.
This is for you. Yep. So you'll give that to us, and then we got to do our homework. And I like John, I truly believe in listening to the people that it affects the most. I always do. But I think in the decisions we make in the future and what we have, it's always good, because you're always wondering, what is the people really, what do they think? And you can't always contact them, but if you've got some pretty good data, it's always good to be able to go back and say, well, based off this. But I think it means we got to do our homework.
Yep. Yeah, and please do, and we can provide data what you need. So.
And I'll commit maybe to emailing the council just as
please.
a reminder of this, include that again so you remember your specific homework. So.
And we can iterate off this, right? It doesn't have to be like A or B. I could
right, yes,
C.
Yeah, yep. Yes.
And she will. And probably D and E.
Yes.
I will.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I'm not saying it's perfect, and I've got mine I like. We're looking for you. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. It should be, it should be representative of the
data that was
the data and the people but
Yeah, I'm listening to you tonight. I feel you're very in tune at a line. I mean, safety came up multiple times, and infrastructure and families and community. So, it's exciting. Right. All right.
All right.
Anything else?
No. Thank you. Other than thank you also, Derek.
I didn't recognize Derek, who's here with me.
Yeah.
My partner in this. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Great, Derek.
Yep, thank you.
he was here early.
Yeah, you saved me a seat.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much. Do you need a motion?
Correct.
All right, let's have a...
I'm sorry. I was thinking about for the 10 o'clock.
That's what I was going to do.
Yes, we do need a motion.
Can I motion to extend the meeting as needed for public comment?
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Barber, seconded by Councilmember Tran, we'll say. All in favor? Aye. All right. Motion passes unanimously again. All right. Okay, we're not leaving. All right. Okay. So let's go. Did you need a motion on this? You've got
It's always helpful.
Yeah.
I think we do, but we're going to do.
Well, we have our homework. That was kind of the next direction, right?
Yeah. All right.
Homework and figure out when.
Okay, excellent. All right, we're going to have our public comment period. Clyde Terry. thank you for waiting so
Yes,
long.
thank you.
Not a problem, and thank you for being patient with me. My name's Clyde Terry, and I live on the corner of Knight's Way and Tyler's Way. After sitting here and listening to everything that's gone on today, my item is pretty minuscule, but it's important to me, so I still want to share it. Kind of a delicate subject, and so I will try to deal with it, discuss it delicately. Our neighborhood seems to have an increasing problem with dogs. Not the dogs themselves, it's what they leave behind when they go on their walks with their owners. My street, I have frontage on both sides of the street, and it's all the way up and down. The biggest concern that I have is that it is the, am I okay with right here? The biggest concern I have is that it's, both streets are heavily, very heavily utilized in the mornings and the evenings by the school kids going down to the elementary school and to the junior high. Just as an example, and I have said I'm going to try to deal with this delicately, but it is not uncommon for me to go out every other day and pick up 2 shovelfuls of what the dogs have left behind. I don't have an animal. I don't like to deal with that, and consequently, I end up having to deal with it. So I've done my due diligence. I found in the city code 15-4-11 that it says that the dog owner is responsible to immediately clean up, pick up after their dog, but I couldn't find anything that would address what happens if they don't. You know, are there fines? Are there penalties? Is there anybody watching? Can signs be put up to notify owners, particularly in that area, because it's a very popular, all residential, very popular walking area for people to get out. I'm trying to hurry. For people to get out and do their walks in the morning, and they take their dogs with them, and then again at night. And it's increasingly very, very difficult to deal with. We've gone so far, a lot of the neighbors, we've gone so far as putting up the little signs, you know, and that seems to be a target now, you know? It's difficult. And I would just hope that the city council and the mayor can take a look at that, see if there's anything that can be done. Signage would be good. I think if we could post, I don't even know if there is a penalty or a fine for dealing with that.
No, I don't think there is, but thank you for, and if you stay, I want to talk to you after.
Okay, thank you.
I would
Thanks.
just say that it's not a very popular place, it's a very poopular.
Yes.
Stop.
And it's getting worse, and that's what disturbs me.
Okay.
Is those school kids, I hate to think what they bring home every day on the bottom of their shoes.
Yeah.
They don't stay on the sidewalk. They run all over the place, you know, on that walkway, the parkway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to kick this off. I do want to do my comments first. I want to make sure that I announce before Mr. Terry leaves that starting next month, we are going to have a pre-session starting at 6:30, specifically for problems like this. I don't want to have to make people wait till 10 o'clock at night to be able, and most times, what our residents want to talk to us about, they want interaction and public invited to be heard. We are not to respond to them. So, and that's not very helpful. So what we're going to do is we're going to starting at 6:30, meet ahead of time. So anybody who has concerns about anything on the agenda, any concerns in their neighborhood, please come at 6:30. We will have council members, we'll have staff, and we can take care aware of some questions ahead of time. And that way.
Have some dialogue.
Have
So
dialogue,
vital, yeah.
which is actually what I think our residents really are craving. And so that will start next month and continue indefinitely. So just so that we'll have increased opportunities for interaction with our folks. Okay, let's go to council member reports. Let's start with Tammy Tran.
Oh.
Anything from, not yet?
No, we had a planning commission meeting last time, but we were here. I was here, so no. And then.
Not this time,
I
okay.
don't have anything to report.
All right, how about anything with Public Works?
The only thing I wanted to iterate and get out there is I talked to Josh. I said, so, tell me a little bit about what you guys do to prepare for a snowstorm when you know the weather's coming like that. And he said, so, and this is more for hopefully people who watch or listen and want to know, they actually go out to their trucks the day before and they make sure they're all in working order. They make sure everything's working on them. They take them out. They make sure their spinners are working for their salt, the hydraulics are working. And not only do they do it then, but also after the storm, they come the day after the storm and they do the exact same thing because so that they don't want to have to go to a truck that's broke down the day before a storm. So I just kind of wanted to get that out, let the council know that's what they're doing to kind of make sure they're prepared and things. That's all I got.
That's great. That's great. Power, anything?
They're just got plenty of projects they're working on and are very busy and making progress on them all. A lot of things coming together, but nothing specific today.
All right. You guys. and
Our
you.
folks still want a museum, that's my biggest thing.
Okay.
They just want they want a museum and money and things like that. I spitballing, I've just been thinking lately about the old library, wondering if there was some way that we could have a museum / like little cafe inside there, maybe even a way to have offices above it that we lease out to, law firm or whoever, somebody that pays for the, I don't know, this is just a total spitball and I just want to put it out there because I want to hear ideas from other people, but I think that if we can get something that fits both sides of us wanting to get more businesses into Kaysville and provide this museum. Anything that we can think of.
You can't have museum and food in the same building, apparently.
Who told you that?
Fawn Morgan.
Museum committee themselves.
They'll be like those little yogurts you have to like.
Oh no, kids will still
go
through
through
that.
Yeah, okay. That's what Councilman Adams says. All right. Oh, and forgive me, one other thing. I think today we had an example of why we need a mayor pro tem, right? So this is what a mayor pro tem does when the mayor becomes incapacitated.
I think that was staged.
I think it was a test. It wasn't. No,
she is
not
ready.
staged.
She's ready at a drop of a hat.
My blood pressure did accelerate during that moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, it is a good. I had a lot of questions. What does that actually mean? And maybe I still have questions what that means. But no, it's good. We are a good team. Parks and Rec, as hilarious as it is, we're having our first 4th of July committee planning meeting coming up. So it's that time of year again. So that'll be great. Like I said last week, if someone is interested in helping with that, we're always looking for new people. We have our local officials day next week, which will be very awesome. We're bringing our youth city council to the Capitol. We're going to meet with our legislatures and go through some awesome workshops and learning about lobbying and all sorts of things. So that's next week. And we are just continuing to work on all of our projects and communications. So thanks, everyone.
All right. Any city manager report?
No, Mayor, you mentioned the
thing
next week.
Okay.
Say very much, I know.
No. All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Nay. I would like it known. I do not want to adjourn. 4-1, Anne Marie. 4-1. You what? Dang it.
Oh, it was the city manager we met at.
She wants to stay.
Yeah, we don't want full unanimous.
She wants to stay.
I wanted to update everybody tomorrow. Okay. You know what I want.
See you in the morning.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you know, that's right.
Sleep my stuff.
In there.
Hey, if it gets done.